Well, good Tuesday morning, and welcome to the conference center. This is a nice change of location, and we're glad you're all here today. Thank you for coming. So today's workshop is interesting because we are neither voting on anything or making any decisions. So I think because of that, with the consensus of my council members, if we will go ahead and get the presentation first so everyone can see what's taking place, and then have public comments at the end, if you'd like to do that. Is everyone okay with that? Okay. So let's go ahead, and the meeting is officially called to order. I will be doing the flag salute, so if you please stand and turn and face the flag. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. And Madam City Clerk, may we have the roll call, please?
Yes. Councilmember Alexander?
Here.
Mayor Edwards?
Here.
Councilmember Ron?
Here.
Councilmember Schwank?
I'm here.
And Councilmember Stewart?
Here.
And Madam Mayor, we do not have any public comments on non-agendized items, so we may dispense with those rules.
All right, then we will go straight to the business item, and it is the workshop on Quality of Life Master Plan, Qlmp update. So I am going to ask Luke, smiling at me already. Good morning. Could we have the staff report, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, thank you very much. Today we are all very excited to be here to hold what is effectively the public kickoff of the update to the Quality of Life Master Plan, or as I'll be referring to it as the Qlmp for short. Before we get started, I just wanted to provide a brief description of the Qlmp and how the visioning meeting today fits into the process for developing the Qlmp and the general plan itself. The Qlmp itself is essentially the community's definition of what matters most to them in relation to their quality of life. It's fundamentally about what matters most. It defines the community's core values and then identifies projects, programs, and initiatives that the city should focus on over a 20-year time span in an effort to manifest those core values. It is important to note that this process is an update to the Qlmp and is not intended to be a complete redo. The original Qlmp was completed in 2011, and the city and community have made significant progress towards realizing many of the goals and projects, which we will go over a little later on. The process for developing the update to the Qlmp involves an intensive public collaboration between the community, the City Council, and the Blue Ribbon Committee. The Blue Ribbon Committee is made up of members of the community appointed by the City Council and have been assembled for the sole purpose of producing a draft updated Qlmp for the Council to consider at a later date. Our consultant team will walk you through the development process in greater detail in a few moments. So, where does today's City Council Visioning Workshop fit into the overall Qlmp update process, and what is the Visioning meeting's primary goal? As I mentioned, this Visioning Workshop represents the kickoff of that intensive public collaboration process, and the goal for today is to hear from each City Council member as to what your vision for Temecula is. What should Temecula be in 2040? What matters most to you, and where do you want the city to go? Hearing each City Council member's vision is the ultimate goal here today. Moving forward, the City Council's vision, discussed in this meeting, along with the results of the citizen survey, which was presented to the City Council at the last City Council meeting, will set parameters for more in-depth discussions with the Blue Ribbon Committee in a series of meetings over the next several months. In addition, there will be multiple opportunities for the community to provide their community feedback in feedback sessions throughout the entire process. The work done by the Blue Ribbon Committee, along with the community feedback, will be put together in a draft updated Qlmp, which will be brought back to the City Council for your consideration. So again, the goal today is to truly think big. The Qlmp process only comes around about once every decade and represents a unique opportunity to set the course for Temecula's future. At this time, I would like to introduce our consultant team that is here to facilitate not only this meeting, but the entire Qlmp process overall. We have Andy Pendoli and Esmeralda Garcia from MIG. MIG has assisted the city on other important planning efforts over our history, including the Uptown Specific Plan, Community Outreach. And we have Doug Svensson from Applied Development Economics. Doug was part of the project team on the original Qlmp, and we're happy to have him back to help us through this effort. So this team will be facilitating your discussion here today. I would also like to recognize our long-range team led by Matt Peters. This team will be managing the development of the Qlmp as well as the general plan update overall. So before we get started, I'd like to turn it over to City Manager, Mr. Aaron Adams, for some additional brief comments.
Thank you, Luke, and good morning, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. It really is exciting to be here today, and I just wanted to provide just a quick snippet of history. I had the privilege of being the project manager on the first and only Quality of Life Master Plan back in 2010. It's hard to believe what we've accomplished since then. And I think one of the cool things that you're going to hear today and see today, and it's probably on that chart over there, is what we've accomplished in half the time. Remember, that was a 20-year visioning process that was community-driven, council-approved, and we're checking off about 2/3 of the things that are on that flow chart. So really exciting that we did it in half the time, but appropriate that we're here today to sort of revisit all of that. I also wanted to share that back in 2010, the City Council charged us with putting together an economic development strategic plan, which in itself isn't unusual. Many cities do ED strategic plans and charting their course and business attraction and retention and that sort of thing and job creation. That was the conversation in 2010. And Doug will remember this, and some others may remember this, but we didn't get very far in that process when council members began to sort of say, you know what, we need to hit pause. And we did, and we started having these internal conversations about the effort and what was important in Temecula, and what we got out of that was what we value the most, and what the community values most is what we call quality of life. And so then it became a conversation internally that said, no, we don't need to do an economic development strategic plan. We need to do a quality of life master plan. So we pivoted back in 2010 and called it the Quality of Life Master Plan, which had different components than just a typical ED strategic plan. And in hindsight, that was a really good move. But in hindsight, too, we didn't know, I think, that document and that process and that community input was going to be so influential in guiding everything that we've done for a decade. I mean, it's guiding the general plan, it's guiding land use, it's guiding the operating budget, it's guiding the capital budget. So in a sense, the Qlmp became really arguably the most important planning document in the city's history. And here we are today, 11 years later, revisiting that. So I'm excited. I want the council to be excited. Today is really for the 5 of you. There's going to be plenty of opportunity for the community. We're going to hear them out. We're going to hear them out today, but we're going to hear you out for the next 9 months. But today was really about the 5 of you. We know you have opinions. We know you have thoughts, concerns, things that are important to you. We want to hear that today. And so the consultant's going to pull that out of all 5 of you over the course of the next couple of hours. So that's important. And the other word that I share this with all humility. I think today and this conversation is also about legacy. It's about all of us, but it's all about what the council, and it's about what kind of things, what groundwork you want to lay tomorrow, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. So that in itself is, if that doesn't get you excited, and I know the planners are excited because this is what they do, long-range planning. So glad to be here this morning. And then vision. This is vision. This is strategic planning. And I can think of no better way to tee this up. I have a very short 5-minute video. It won't be foreign to you, but it's something that I think captures the spirit of Temecula. It captures the early leaders and the history. So please enjoy this 5-minute video.
Get into your time machine, dial it back to 1989, December 1st. Dear City Council, the aspirations of those who came before you their families and accomplishments, the sum total of Temecula history, are now entrusted to you. You are the caretakers of the soul of Temecula. Please remember and respect your roots. As we write this, expectations about the future are high, like a brilliant and many-faceted jewel. Temecula glows with a rare natural beauty. A gifted decorator, Mother Nature, arranged the setting of the Temecula Valley with rolling hills, sun filtering through the mist, clear air and sweet water, and a Mediterranean climate. This was the inspiration for our settlers, who in 1989 gave birth to this new city. If our efforts and those of our successors bear fruit, and our dreams materialize, Temecula in your day will be a thriving commercial industrial center with pleasant residential areas, roads over which it is a treat to drive, a center of culture and learning, an old town that reveres and preserves its place in history. And shares its significance with each succeeding generation. And a nearby wine country known worldwide and protected from urban encroachment. Are the air and water truly fresh and pure and clean in your day? Are parks, golf, tennis, cycling, jogging, horseback riding, and a variety of team sports within easy access to your constituents? Do travelers passing through for the first time still say, "My, what a beautiful valley"? If they do, thank you for that. We value our quality of life almost as much as life itself. We trust you do too. For the sake of our children, may you enjoy the civic inheritance we pass on to you. like a baton in a relay race. In our lap of the relay, we have sprinted ahead. But this is a long-distance race. As you get ready to receive the baton, let civic pride, not greed, motivate you to move forward. From silent, unseen bleachers, we cheer you on. God be with you.
Now, of course, that was a video we produced for then Mayor Mike Nagar, State of the City, but it's timeless, and I think it demonstrates the prophetic nature of Perry Peters in the letter he wrote to Temecula's leadership back in 1989. Pretty good stuff there. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Luke for our consultants, and we'll jump right into things. So thank you for that.
And I'm going to turn it over to Andy Penley and team.
I always feel so much better when this happens to other people, because it happens to me.
Go forward. I wanted to just make a few remarks about the plan itself, and I think Aaron described the evolution and history of the document very well. It is a document that provides a long-term 20-year vision and a set of goal statements for the community to follow, but it also provides a number of very specific metrics and measurement indicators so that the city can measure its progress on a year-by-year basis, even though we are working toward a 20-year vision. And I think that is one of the major reasons that this really has been a living document, and as Aaron described, very much part of the city's day-to-day management of city affairs and progress toward accomplishing specific goals. So today, we're going to talk a bit about some of those metrics and kind of try to tie together the broader vision to how we measure progress. So that's one of the things that I wanted to highlight as we go through the process. The Qlmp itself contains more than 20 separate goal statements and a number of different topics, but they all condense into these 6 major core values. And being a quality of life master plan, health and livable city is ranked number 1. So there's a lot of focus on access to health care, but also city form that allows for healthy lifestyles throughout Temecula, and focus on diverse housing choices, but also connectivity with trails and systems that allow people to recreate and to do outdoor healthy activities. Economic prosperity is recognized as a key foundation to quality of life, and as Aaron mentioned, the whole process started out as an economic development strategic plan, and that's still a major core value in the plan. But these are a number of other things that are obviously important to community quality. Safety and preparation against disasters. There's a lot of recognition in the plan about the potential for major disasters and being prepared either for fire or flood, but also ongoing safety and security. Sustainability, green building efficient water and energy use, the beginning discussion of greenhouse gas emissions and how the city can address those issues. Transportation, clearly, as we'll review in a moment, the survey results, transportation is a major interest of the community, but also, again, improving the connectivity through trail systems and transportation improvements that improve the quality of life. And then finally, accountable and responsive city government is the glue that holds all this together and moves the whole program forward. One of the key elements of the plan was a number of community projects that were identified to help implement these goals and the different indicators, and there's been an enormous amount of progress on these projects, particularly the community college, the hospital, the community services master plans, a number of things that have occurred, some of the transportation improvements. And Andy is going to now facilitate a discussion on your perception of these accomplishments, what some of the priorities are, and some of the things that you're most proud of as we've gone forward.
Actually, yes, I'll say a few words. I'll say just very briefly, very excited to be here. And kind of reflecting on the video also, my family's got their imprint here in the community. My great-grandmother was an owner of the Hotel Temecula, so and operated it for quite a while back in some years back. I think she sold it in the 60s. So, but I was really excited to be here, but I wanted to just say hello in that regards, and I'll be back up. But Esmeralda is going to walk us through a conversation with you about accomplishments. So.
Yeah, well, welcome, and thank you for having us here. We're really excited to get started on this and hear your input on the vision and seeing what you'd like to pop out of what you've completed over the last Quality of Life Master Plan and what you want to prioritize. So to start, we want to go over the accomplishments. What are you most proud of, and also looking at anything else that you wanted to add or that you highlight, that you would highlight that has been accomplished. And I think you have in your packet a copy of the diagram that's up here as well. But to start, just the way we're going to facilitate the discussion for those of you who have participated in meetings that Andy has led or others in our team, we're going to be recording or jotting down notes here on the piece of paper, and that will be a summary of the discussion. But would like to put it out to the council members. What you're most proud of, or highlight any of the accomplishments that have been incorporated into the first Quality of Life Master Plan. Maybe we can start with the mayor.
Well, we've had 2 recessions since incorporation, the mid-1990s, and then the second one starting in 2008. And through all of that, we have been able to continue with proper maintenance of roadways, expansion of roadways, improving our infrastructure. We can look at all the bridges, the Pala Bridge, the Old Town Bridge, and we've expanded the Rancho California Road Bridge at least twice that I know of, and the Winchester Bridge. So, those are key elements to keeping the city moving. Not stagnant. And as we did that, we were able to maintain every year since incorporation a balanced budget with at least 20% reserve, and more than that actually, but a mandate of 20% reserve on the side for emergencies. So when you're going through those types of situations, you might not be able to move forward, but you need to be able to maintain. And we also were able to support our businesses and our residents through those times. So I think that fiscally, being able to not just survive, but to thrive in those times when things were so difficult. And other cities were declaring bankruptcy across the country, and local cities around us were exhausting their reserves and stuff. So I'm very proud of the fact that we held the line on spending and were able to come out of it, as successful as we were with a vision to the future.
Great, that is a major accomplishment. From other members of the council?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just thought you were, go ahead. I mean, who wants to go? Who's you, Zach? Stu, you want to start at the end?
Sure. Well, I do think infrastructure is huge in Temecula because, as we know, traffic is not getting any better. And so I believe, the original Overland Bridge was a huge success during this time period. But the extension to Diaz is going to be almost equally for everybody who works, and because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to connect the employment center with the housing centers. And so by doing that, we're basically freeing up Rancho and Winchester. Because if you have an emergency on either of those roads and emergency vehicles have to get through, it's difficult sometimes. So by adding that one more additional, plus Cherry Street's going to become a low flow too. So now we're going to go from 2 major to 4, so that's going to be huge. So that's I think one of the things that I see as one of the big accomplishments in Temecula is just constantly improving our infrastructure and maintaining our infrastructure too. So.
Great.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So for me, when you talk about being proud of things, it's really difficult to choose just one thing because they don't exist in a silo, right? Like a lot of these are sort of, if you don't have a hospital, if you don't have higher education, right? If you don't have a booming old town, right? Like a lot of these things, so it's difficult for me to pick some of those out. But the things that I'm sort of most proud of just individually is that connection between higher education, our public libraries, and health, and what that means to the community. And of course, obviously, transportation is important, but the idea that if we're going to pick something that I'm certainly most proud of, it's that. And a lot of what that is collaboration, because we didn't do that alone. We did that as a community, whether it's with higher education or whether it's with a hospital. So those things for me are just the things that stick out. We talk about culture, we talk about the theater, the museums, both museums that we have, just adding that to our community so that there is interest in furthering their education and lifelong learning and just having a true culture and an identity. So for me, if I had to pick, which is, again, it's very difficult because these don't exist on their own, they exist in totality, which makes our community such a wonderful place, that would be my choice.
Very good. Matt?
Well, I think the interesting one for me is the reinvestment that Temecula has had, especially in the last 5 or so years, right? Public Works is a good example of this, right? We're not waiting for things to get bad before they get fixed. So we're not letting the city slide into that era of deferred maintenance and that sort of mentality. And there's a reinvestment in things like parks, right, and streets and our infrastructure to make sure that it maintains a level of service and acceptability in the community and sets a good standard. And the same, I think, can be said for law enforcement and fire as well, right? We're keeping pace with the growth of the community and developing public safety programs that are responsive to the needs of the community as it shifts. So I think that's another big goal or accomplishment over time. The other one is just simply our ability to attract new businesses and become this sort of economic hub for Southwest Riverside County. I mean, the bulk of the employment is in the city of Temecula or surrounding area here. And that was, I think, in that last 10 years has been a massive economic shift, much for the better. And it's not just from an employment standpoint, but it's, it feeds into that transportation standpoint, right? The more jobs you can have locally, the less our folks here have to commute. So there's a nice positive sort of feedback loop. And then, the other one is the family-friendly small town feel. I think that, a lot of us moved here because of that and enjoy the value that brings and being able to maintain that. I mean, it's identified as, part of what the Quality of Life Master Plan wanted to accomplish in the first place, but making sure that certain features are maintained and like even the parks, right? The reinvestment in the parks over the last bunch of years. I grew up with a park across the street. I think I was telling Pat this the other day, that consisted of a couple of metal bars and a few concrete culverts. and a swing set, which is how I got these scars on my forehead. So, but that was it, right? And to see the kind of stuff that we produce in our neighborhoods today is pretty remarkable. And recognizing that a park we built 10, 20 years ago, those standards are able to shift and adjust to our community's interests and needs is pretty good. And then the last thing is, I think the amount of support that we've been able to provide to different segments of our community. And I think our last meeting I talked about veterans and seniors and special needs, and these aren't just platitudes that the city puts forward for these communities, but actively develops real programs that have tangible, meaningful, and measurable goals and objectives, and we've been able to track those successes over time. So those are the big ones, I think, that really fit in well to what we've accomplished.
Great.
All right. Well, I definitely have to say that I agree with all my colleagues here. And it's interesting how to see each one of us have different points of view, but really it's all kind of one and the same to build this great city. And so in some of the areas, I just kept writing because there were so many things and great accomplishments. I think somebody else here had mentioned it's kind of hard to consolidate everything. But some of the things that really captured my heart in a sense was that we're keeping our city family friendly, and family first is really big. Also, the fact that we have, again, I know some of my colleagues said this, safety and fire. We just have, we just got a new RSO here, so we're continuing to build on our safety and police department as well, and continue to flourish in that. The hospital was another big one, and as we continue to build on that, that's going to be another big area to, bring more jobs into the area and just be able to work with the health and wellness of our residents as well. Parks and trails. I know a lot of us are always on those trails and parks. So the healthy lifestyle, and I think we've definitely been able to bring that to our city here in Temecula with our residents as well, and bringing us together, not just creating a place for people to work out, but actually a place for people to gather and connect. So I think that's beautiful. The urban campus. Tourism obviously is huge and really helpful for us here. Our urban amenities, again, I just mentioned a few before, but the one thing that really sets out that I love is the fact that Temecula has always set the bar high in building excellence and always trying to strive for reaching even higher than what we set. And so I think that's one of the things that we can say here. We got it done, and that we got it done so quickly because we set the bar high, but yet we even went higher than what we expected. So I just think that's an amazing accomplishment in itself. So I just appreciate the previous council members, the staff, because all of them really were the ones who put this together, and the community. So thank you.
I'd like to add one other, only because had we not done it, we would have missed a window of opportunity, and that is the fact that the city purchased the hills to the west of us and will retain those as open space, as well as we have annexed the 5,000 acres of the Santa Margarita Ecological Reserve. So between that and the number of parks we have per capita, I would say Temecula probably has more open space and parks than any city our size, at least in California, and maybe, under greater. So if we had not purchased that land at the time, it could be gone now, and we would have no jurisdiction over it because it was already slated for development and for homes.
Great. Well, that's a great way to end this section of the meeting and this facilitation. So Andy's captured a few of the ideas here and milestones and accomplishments and what you're proud of. And I think one thing that I'm hearing is that you all understand that they're all connected, is what I'm hearing. And I'm glad that each of you kind of highlighted different things, but it sounds like that, Councilmember Alexander said that you set the bar high and you went above. So now what happens next? So that this provides a good foundation for identifying priorities and understanding your vision then for the future. So thank you. So we're going to continue to capture your thoughts here and ideas as we go through each section. I think now we're going to get to the survey. Okay, yeah. Great. So we'll take a pause and then we'll come back and capture your feedback in the next segment.
Right.
And we are keeping time. We have a very aggressive agenda, but you all are really You've done a fantastic job of summarizing your ideas, so I think we're going to get through everything in pretty good time.
Good, thank you. Great start. Thank you for the insights here. And please let me just on a process point too, if you feel, obviously it's being well recorded, but if you feel I missed any highlights on the wall graphic, don't be shy. But just wanted to briefly recap to continue the conversation here. A few of the points that you received last week on the 13th at the council meeting as presented by Tim McClarney with True North Research. We just extracted a little bit of that data just to bring back to see the conversation. And I'll be very brief here. But again, some of the things that the community identified through the survey, again, the safety, your low crime rate, the shopping, the services, cleanliness, family friendliness, that small town feel, the proximity to other areas, so many things that you just reflected right now. And then also, but particularly looking ahead, what is one change the community would like to see, in terms of the future of the city, and obviously getting around, continuing to work on your mobility, reducing traffic overall, clearly, as you can see, was very high on the list, but homelessness, of course, continuing on your roads and repairs, going along with traffic probably, right? And continuing that focus on public safety and how you plan for growth overall. The importance of your services, and we just extracted one of those here. And as you can see, as you recall, the emergency focus, maintaining those facilities that you have, streets and roads, maintaining that low crime rate, and your fire protection, your garbage services, the quality of the variety and quality of your parks and recreation facilities. So again, high on the list of your residents. So again, just very much in brief here, as you recall, despite the pandemic, your residents are feeling pretty high levels of satisfaction when it comes to overall quality of life, your overall performance as a city, and with specific services. Generally, of course, city government viewed positively, staff high marks for their customer service. Again, these are the opportunity areas that I know you see here, some of which you've touched on. Traffic and mobility, growth and development, your open space, natural habitats, homelessness, neighborhood police patrols, as you're continuing, I know you've been focusing on. Looking at how diversity and inclusion and city event services and policies are addressed. And again, that city resident level of communication. You've made great strides in all the tools and methods you use, but continuing to elevate that and seeing what you can continue to pursue overall. So I know Esmeralda's going to come back up, but we want to just bring a few of those points back for your thoughts and further discussion. So.
Yeah, that's really great. Talk about our report card. Worked with numerous communities and have worked with Dr. McClarney over a variety of projects, and sounds like your community is pretty, aware of the accomplishments and the success in the city, and they're quite happy, although traffic I did see was number one. But what other priorities, based on the short list that was presented here as a summary, what are other priorities that maybe were not in the survey or that you might think of that we should consider?
Well, I think we need to continuously update, retrofit, refurbish, restore, and that's what we're doing with our parks right now, and that applies to everything. We need to make sure that our city facilities are technically, technologically up to date and advanced. We need to make sure that they are obviously to code, which is fairly basic, but that they continue to serve our residents as our demographic changes. Temecula's demographic is changing as some people are getting older. I'm not, but some people happen to be. With the median price of homes right now, we're seeing fewer young families move to town with children. But, that has an ebb and flow. So I think we need to remain ready to be able to serve that new demographic, which is going to be, a lot more seniors. So we're looking at senior facilities. We've got senior facilities being built and that have been built, things like that. But expectations of our residents, they don't change, and they still expect the best, and we always want to do the best we can every single time. And that means keeping things up to date and looking new and, beautiful.
Great. I'd like to share next.
You covered it, briefly in the survey about public safety, and I think that's a huge quality of life issue. And I think going forward, I think one of those things that a lot of people don't realize, that if you're not improving, you're not improving. And so, and that's what I think our city needs to start focusing on, is the future of public safety, and, you know, what are the needs in 2040, you know? So I think those are some of the things that I think, because quality of life is really why people love to live here. And so, and we do provide an amazing quality of life for our citizens here in Temecula. So I just would hate to see that degrade in any way, shape, or form. I would love to only see it increase. So, and I think safety is a huge part of that component, so.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thanks. So, you know, for me, I think when we talk about the future of the community, I mean, clearly the community is engaged and really drives this process, drove the process in 2010, and that's really, you know, our task is to sort of hear that stuff out. But, you know, this survey covered quite a lot. I mean, it was a very extensive survey, and they always are, and we do them every 2 years, I want to say, is when we do the surveys.
We tried to do them every 2 or 3 years for the last, you know, decade and a half, but we over-surveyed our residents in 2015 and 16 when we had the ballot measure, so we pulled back a little bit. So we're going to get back on a regular routine, not inundate people with surveys.
Yeah. And I think that's important, right? We're continuing to engage. But for me, the pandemic and COVID has sort of accelerated a lot of things, whether it's the economy, whether it's the environment. A lot of things are changing. Temecula as a whole is changing. Things are changing. So for me, you know, there isn't anything that wasn't captured in that. I don't feel that was sort of missing, as the question is there any priorities you feel are important that are future, is just to continue that engagement, because things are changing, and COVID and again, the pandemic has really accelerated that. So for us, internally and for staff, to be mindful of that and those changes that happen at a much accelerated pace, that's important for me.
I got a whole list here. So, you know, let's start at the top, the public safety piece. I think, you know, I agree with what Councilmember Stewart said on public safety and making sure that we're out in front of public safety issues, not being stagnant on that and being prospective on the planning. Code enforcement, I think, is going to become a bigger issue in the city, especially as the community ages. And so I think that's something we need to focus more on. And then being responsive to new risks and threats. And I know just internally as a city, but also community-wide threats related to cybersecurity are a pretty important component and related to not just, you know, our own operations, but operations of our, you know, utilities and water infrastructure and so forth. Something that needs to be taken a little more seriously. And then community resilience generally. I know that's mentioned in the last plan, but I think we need to expand that definition a little bit and recognize that, you know, historically, I think, you know, 10 years ago, we weren't talking about, you know, necessarily concerns related to wildfire threats, for instance, right? But I think we've seen in the last 10 years that those threats in communities that historically we hadn't seen as necessarily that high risk, the scale and magnitude of those threats are vastly different than what we were experiencing or expecting 10 years ago. And following on that sort of environmental thread, I think we need to take very seriously, you know, it's funny because when I first got on the city council, we were in a drought, right? And we had this water workshop. We had all sorts of electeds and water officials and everybody talking about it. And I remember at some point, you know, it was so deep into the drought, everybody was worried about it. And I said, well, there's one thing we can promise is that it's going to rain again, right? I mean, you know, it's definitely going to rain again. So, you know, at least keep that in perspective. But here we are, you know, facing another statewide issue. And look, you know, every 10 years, if you go back into the history, California experiences some sort of major decline in water resources. And yet every 10 years we act like it's the first time it's happening. And so we need to break that pattern. And it's the same thing for energy. I mean, you know, energy is a great concept when we have it and everybody's fine. And then every few years or so we go into these, we're going to have rolling brownouts or blackouts or whatever. And, you know, and yet we as a city don't control water or energy, right? But I think we need to be more actively engaged in that conversation for our residents, and at least make sure that we're working on programs that increase our resilience as a community, and whatever we can do to ensure that we have access to those resources. So that's the other one. The other one I think is taking a quick left turn here is arts and cultural programs. You know, I know we've had a great investment of that during the you know, last Qlmp time period, but I think we really need to up our game on that one as well, because it seems like every weekend, at least, you know, when we're you know, in normal conditions, every weekend there's some exciting event or something that's going on in Temecula that can keep our community engaged. And we have these signature events, and I'm not saying every weekend needs to be a signature event, so, you know, but I'm saying that, you know, we really do need to establish our identity in that space, and it's simple things like, you know, a performing arts center. You know, we don't have regionally, we don't have some of these features that I think could really set Temecula apart and create that sort of more leadership role. You know, I'll just mention transportation because I'd be remiss if I didn't. I mean, you know, it's a huge issue, and it's going to be an increasing issue. But along with that, I think we need to throw in the parking question as well, not just here in Old Town, but other areas too, and just start to address the need, the growing need, and recognize that that need is probably going to shift, you know, during the next, you know, 20 years, right? The way we're driving and the way we're, you know, using transportation services is changing, and so we need to sort of remain adaptive to that as much as possible. And then the only other one is the, you know, Mayor, you mentioned, you know, economic integrity. I think, you know, I think we're doing great right now, and that's a lot of the, you know, planning that's gone into it, the dedication to funding our reserves, the, you know, conservative nature in which we spend our, you know, taxpayer dollars. But, you know, moving forward, I think we need to recognize that, you know, we've been very resilient and very strong during hard and difficult economic times. But, you know, making sure that that's a centerpiece in our planning. And I know it is, but, you know, that needs to be memorialized as a part of a quality of life issue as well.
One other thing we don't really necessarily like to think about, but we need to, is the fact that a new council, as we turn over council members, a new council could reverse every single thing that we're doing. And so, you know, I don't know of a way to, you know, we can't permanently establish things, but we need to make sure that we promote all the good things about Temecula and keep doing it, you know, and our residents should always drive the process. So as long as the residents are driving the process, I think we'll be all right. But, you know, you never know.
Right?
Madam Mayor, actually, that was a great point, because one of the things that I was able to do, and especially as a new city council member, was to go back and watch the meeting that you guys discussed. And it gave me the ability to see what the residents back then 10 years ago wanted. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something that we need to keep in mind. Okay, there's things on paper, but sometimes when we go to the discussion, when we go to the table and go watch how it was created, it really gives us a good perspective of how we can continue to grow. So I love that point that you made. We need to, and you looked a lot younger, by the way. Just want to share that with you. You're still beautiful, but so, but no, I think it's really important that we do, and I love that video, Aaron, that you put up first about just going back in time, and I think that's really important, because if there's anything that I've learned during my time coming out as a city council member over the last year, before I got elected, was the people really want this town to continue to be a small feel to it, but yet grow. And that was one of the things actually that you talked about in that video, was how do we add to the population, but at the same time yet still feel like a small town. And so it's challenging, because, you know, you live in big cities with more people and there's more need, and So, but I think right now we're doing a good job, but I think there's still ways we can still involve the community to be able to get stronger in that. So that's one of the areas, is really reviewing that and seeing how we can keep that area real, and look at the community's concerns as well with that. Another area, again, public safety, I think just not only because it was number one on there, but one of the ideas that was brought to mind, and I spoke again, I brought this up to staff, was looking at it as the 1 to 1,000, 1,000 residents to 1 officer. Maybe that's something else that we can look at as maybe increasing. And I think that goes perfectly along well with providing neighborhoods with police patrol. Again, that public safety is very important. More people, we need more patrol, just to keep law and order. But again, in a safe manner. So the other thing I think that everybody on this table could agree with is the fact that we want a classy Old Town. And so I want to ensure that our Old Town stays classy, whether it's with a theater, whatever that looks like, but it's not going to be a drunk fest. And there's things that, are in motion and meetings that we're going to be having to talk about that, but really keeping it to the point to where people are coming out to the theaters and wanting to make it enjoyable and safe and fun. And we're on the right road, but I know we could, I think, even improve in some areas in that too. So thank you.
Great. Additional thoughts? And then we do have a brief overview of the process and how we're going to go about this. And then we'd like to engage in a conversation with you about your desired outcomes for the process and the plan.
I think I'd say that since we did the last Qlmp, we've learned a lot also and incorporated new ideas, new mechanisms, new processes, new procedures, new structure to so many things. And I think we need to be willing to always continue to do that as change dictates. So and that's why when we went through and listened to Perry Peters, it's just remarkable how prophetic he was in kind of asking the questions that really properly described Temecula. So I think, we need to make sure that we maintain that flexibility and, that we can do the bidding of the residents as things change.
Great. Thank you.
In this next segment, we'd like to review in more detail the process and logistics of actually doing the Qlmp update and get your input on that process so that we all can see how the 9 months is going to play out. And our key objective is consistent with what you've all been saying this morning, is to engage the community. So that is our main emphasis in designing the process. And Esmeralda and Andy are going to describe for you in more detail the specifics of the different activities that we have in mind for that. But basically, through the process and getting the community input will be, defining the vision, may not change dramatically, but reaffirming what the core values are. And as I mentioned earlier, analyzing and updating the indicators that go with each of those. And just on that note, and I'm going to be sharing in the next segment some of the data that we've begun to collect to do some of that updating, but we'll be engaging very closely with city staff throughout this process to really understand a lot of the metrics as you look through the Qlmp are city service standards in a sense. The number of police officers per population, the response times for the fire department, the number of parks for the population that you have. And so a lot of those metrics do relate very closely to the operation of city government, so we'll be very closely involved with city staff to update that information and think about maybe new ways to measure as we go forward, because as several of you have mentioned, there are a number of technological changes and improvements that we're all experiencing, and so even how we deliver city services changes over time, and we want to be sure that our metrics captures that. So as we go through the process that they're going to describe for you next here, just be aware that we're going to be infusing this data elements to that throughout the Blue Ribbon Committee discussions and other community engagement processes. So with that, I'll turn it over to Andy to kind of describe the Blue Ribbon Committee and the rest of the process.
All right. Thank you, Doug. So as you recall, you know well, you've established the Blue Ribbon Committee to help guide this process overall, and so we have just some, referencing your participants. And just want to emphasize that they really will be the leading this process overall in terms of developing the plan, reacting to the data, the work that comes forward from the project team, from city staff, but also particularly the information from the community. We're going to be continuing to make sure that on a parallel process, all the community engagement efforts and results as they occur are brought to them to help further inform that process. So we see it being very iterative, but very much they will be guiding this overall for us. And I think, I apologize, I think I had it doubled up here. This is a more complete list of the committee members here, of course. So as you'll generally recall. So I just wanted to briefly, highlight that as a reminder for you. But again, as I was touching on their roles, as you define them, they were really intended, you formulated this committee to represent the community's geographic, demographic, and economic interests, ideally, right? That can be a challenge to do with any size group, whether that's 5 to 25 to 50 overall. But again, serving as the primary advisory group to the process overall, reviewing all that data, those work products, but also particularly we want them to very much be working sessions with them very closely, where they will be able to provide input on key issues and opportunities. We do want to minimize, I'll say this looking ahead, my commitment is to minimize presenting at them, if you will, a lot more engagement, discussion as a large group, as smaller groups, break out with the community at large. So we intend it to be very dynamic with them overall. But particularly, we also want them to assist in making sure we're reaching all aspects of the community, all aspects of your community stakeholders, if you will, your residents, businesses, all the organizations, the nonprofits that are all important to the city. They're going to be really important to making sure we're connecting with everybody overall. So you have this as a handout. So I apologize. I know it's hard to see on screen, but I wanted to take just a few minutes to walk through with you the process that we intend to go through. And I think I at least have my mouse here. I can, hopefully that's somewhat visible for you. But you're, of course, here helping us to kick things off in the process. The Blue Ribbon Committees I mentioned across the top, we anticipate 6 meetings with them overall, largely focused on further refinement and development of those core values and the data that are informing them. But we also expect, as you see kind of in the middle in green, if you will, this is really where we intend to engage the community through a multi-pronged approach overall. We want to make sure we connect one-on-one with additional key stakeholders who again have a really active role in supporting the community. We want to make sure we have a really robust web-based engagement with the community through dovetailing off of your website, of course, but with some dedicated web resources, social media campaign that leverages the city's social platforms, but also connecting with your community's resources as well, those networks. We really rely on and look forward to them supporting that effort overall. And then more broadly, we anticipate community questionnaires for people to be able to complete on their time when they can't attend a meeting, as the case may be. But we also definitely very much anticipate those good old-fashioned community workshops in venues like this out in the community. We're seeing a lot of, I'll tell you, I've seen a lot of communities we're working in, people appreciate the virtual workshops. Even if we were able to go back to fully in person, some people like the Zoom workshop. They can't come to Tuesday 6 o'clock workshop because they're making dinner, they have little ones to take care of, and they appreciate that. So we want to explore all those opportunities and making sure we're maximizing those choices for everyone. So we've got a lot of additional ideas for more community engagement toolkits that community members can use, hopefully connecting with schools to make sure we're connecting closely with your future leaders in the community. And then ultimately at the end of the day, looking forward to coming back to you, of course, with a robust quality life master plan overall in the process. And so I think with that, we wanted to engage you in this and kind of check in with you and make sure this is a process you're feeling good about and further thoughts on how we move that forward. So,
Can you explain what a pop-up engagement activity is?
Absolutely.
I have an idea, but I just want to make sure.
Absolutely, and it can be many things to many people, and it's a good example of where we want to be flexible and creative with what we may do. So that could be something as having a booth or maybe a sizable booth space at the farmers market, where we know there will be a high level of foot traffic, that we can connect with people, even just for a couple minutes, even if they don't have time to stay and talk for 5 or 10, they at least can connect with the process and know how to be more closely engaged. That could be going out and attending other community events, similar community events. that can be having a space at the mall, instead, where similarly, where we have a lot of foot traffic. It can be connecting with other unique things that are happening. And we very much don't want to do it just for the sake of creativity, but we want to do activities that are tied to where we know we have a pretty good confidence we can connect with those community members that we think we may be having challenge reaching other ways. So,
Are we specifically engaging our youth? I know we're working with the school district, but, Temecula's, that's our biggest segment of the population.
Absolutely.
Is our youth, so.
I think that's a great example of what we wanted to get into this conversation. We'd like to hear details from you as you see this proposed process where your expectations and ideas about how we connect with youth, because I know, back to developing the youth master plan, that's always been foundational to the city. I know Esmeralda wants to lead you through that, and I apologize, I'm going to make a little noise in the background. I'm going to switch out my paper as we continue the conversation, but for that.
Andy will catch up. He'll start writing as soon as he switches the paper. But so two questions then. The first, building off of the success of the existing plan, now that you've been able to make a lot of progress there, what are your desired outcomes for this phase, both in the process, what would success look like when the plan is completed, and then what should the plan do for you? And then we also do want to hear your ideas about maybe what this framework might look like once we initiate or implement it, because this is our starting point, but your ideas about certain groups we should reach out to, or activities, events, or other methods that we should incorporate into our community engagement, that would be important. So we'll start first with your desired outcomes, both again for the process and then the final plan. What should it do for you? And so again, building off of the success of the existing plan where you were able to accomplish quite a bit.
So Jessica, let me start at your end so you're not always last.
Come on, let me be last. It's easier. No. All right, so direct outcomes. See, I had time when everybody else was doing their thing. I think the biggest thing for me is just ensuring that we have, and it looks like go back to that.
Sure.
I'm sorry. It looks like, just the engagement of all the people. I think one of the things that we found out as a city council a little bit more in depth at our last meeting was the fact that communication is getting dropped. That there is something, and it's not that we're not trying to, because we are, it's just, again, trying to find those areas that the ball's getting dropped, and we need to find it to be able to ensure that everybody is getting communication, everybody is getting the word out, and we're getting information from everybody. So really one of my questions, and I don't even know if this is even part of it, but what is new on this type of communication that we haven't had in the past? Like, is there something else that we're missing from previous, or is it the same type of communication, or does that make sense?
Yeah, and I would say that in our approach, we always tailor the approach, even if it was a similar process as we completed previously. Things change, and as some of you have said, we need to be flexible. So even though the tools and methods might be similar to previous efforts, we want to make sure we're engaging. So for instance, one comment that was made about the changing demographics. So if seniors are going to have different needs, maybe there's special focus or emphasis on one of the pop-ups, or maybe there's something tailored where we put out a community questionnaire and reach out to, maybe areas or neighborhoods where there's a concentration of seniors, or maybe there's a group at a church who focuses more on seniors. So
Right.
This is our organizing framework. Yes, similar tools, but we can adapt and tailor them based on our current conditions and the environment. Things might look different now post-pandemic. So we want to tailor those. So it's open, and that's what the type of feedback that we want to get from you. So then Andy and I can go back and make adjustments.
Okay, so can you ask me your question one more time, because I think I had one more thing to add to that.
Okay, so the desired outcomes for the plan and the process and the final plan, and then any additional thoughts you have that we should consider for the community engagement.
So one of the things that actually popped up when the Qlmp was initially starting, and this is overall, I agree, I believe that Mike Nagar had stated this, is that he wanted to ensure that the churches, all churches, temples, churches, mosques, whatever, everybody had an ability to be able to bring their input to the table. And so just to make sure that we're going out to them as well, to be able to, reach them, because I think we can really reach the community on a larger scale, reaching out to the churches. So I don't know if that's even been part of this as well, because I know you had even mentioned that. So
yeah, sure.
That's
Great.
it.
Council member, I might just add that on the Blue Ribbon Committee, there was, I believe, someone appointed, it was appointed for the Interfaith Council, which the Interfaith Council
talked about that,
would
yeah.
represent all faiths. And so there is going to be a leadership position earmarked specifically for that. So I think maybe that'll check the box.
Yeah, definitely. So.
Great. So we're going in this order now?
Yeah, Matt?
Okay. So the first being your desired outcomes for the process, and then the final plan, what will it do for you, for the city? And then are any additional thoughts on just the overall process, the community engagement, and who we should reach out to, if there's anything that we should know more about so that we can implement effectively?
Well, let's start with the communication piece then. Let's start with the communication piece then. I think we do an admirable job in the city of trying to get the word out there. But there are folks who remain disconnected. So maybe, Aaron, we could use this as that opportunity to figure out where those gaps may be and beef up those areas where we think communication and outreach could be improved. For my perspective, the desired outcome, I like to use the acronym SMART, right? So it's first it has to be specific, right? Like let's not deal in vague generalities of, well, we want Temecula to have a high quality of life, right? I mean, let's drill down into what specifically we mean by that, right? Is it issues related to income? Is it what are those high quality of life, right? So make sure they're specific, make sure they're measurable, something that you can actually tie some bit of data to, because what we don't want is to say, well, we feel like quality of life has improved, but we don't have a metric for it. So specific, measurable, attainable is the other piece, right? It has to be something that we can attain, but I don't think that should limit us, right? Like let's not set the bar too low. Let's set it as high as we can, and even maybe reach farther than we think we can go.
Yeah.
The other one is relevant. Make sure it's Temecula specific, right? We're not trying to model ourselves off another community. We're trying to grow Temecula, and make sure that it in some way feeds back into something that we have currently in our city as far as our departments and services and staff and support go. And if there are, as we start moving through this list and identifying these check marks, if there are areas where we don't have, you mentioned Michael earlier, and the positions that we've been backfilling that we haven't had in the city, historically. This is our opportunity to identify those, as if we're hitting metrics or things that we want done, but we don't have a position for it. Well, then let's figure out how to get that position done. And then the other one is time-based, right? That's sort of the last part of the acronym is time-based. Let's make sure that we set some sort of limit on some of these objectives, right? That we're actively moving toward those and say, we would like to accomplish, whatever that is by 2025 or whatever. Have them actionable, so we're not so we're not missing them along the way, I guess. And one of the things I don't want to see the city doing is having that big whiteboard of all the lists of things with dates on the end, and then we just get together and we change the dates every couple of years, right? I mean, we really want to be able to make progress towards some of these things. And if we're not, and if we're coming up against that, recognize it and put more resources or effort into that. And then, you mentioned, what's your desired outcome, or what do you want to see this thing do? Well, I also think, we do our community surveys, which are, I think, good. It really gives us a metric of how we're doing. But I think the Qlmp could also serve as a report card for the city. And whether it's once a year or once every 2 years, we need to define those metrics. And let's go back to the quality of life issue, right? If air quality is a great example. I don't know why we're not, more actively engaged in reporting out on air quality in the city. And if air quality, as an example, is getting worse, then what should we be doing as a community and as a city to actively engage AQMD, Caltrans and others, the discrete, areas where we know pollution and things are coming from, then why aren't we actively engaged in that process to identify that as an opportunity to make it better, right? So we have to be able to create real clear metrics, again, going back to that one, real clear metrics that we can report out on and say, our average call volume for, this type of priority one call has gone down because we have these types of programs, or, fires of this type, or ringing alarms, or, whatever it is, being able to tie that back. And then the last piece is, if we do that sort of on an annual basis, then it's that idea of adaptive management, right? That, like, we don't just report back and say, yeah, we've slipped in these categories, but we create these feedback loops to say, okay, we're slipping here, or we're not keeping pace with the goals we wanted to achieve there, and make sure that we're, actively putting that, into our planning process and improving where we can.
Great, that's great direction.
Yeah.
Mayor, do you mind if I just
Sure.
add something? I almost forgot. So one to two things that I want to just add onto what I was talking about before, because you had asked the question, are there additional community engagement activities you'd like us to consider? And one of the things, again, always going back to those first responders. I think having events with the first responders could be really encouraging for our community to create a community with them, rather than it just be community and first responders, and engaging that and somehow having activities together. I think about DARE years ago, but even where I come from, we would have community fights and activities against the firefighters and the police department, and it was a way for the community to come together and just have fun and enjoy the time together, and then not only together but again with the first responders. So I think that's a big area, and of course we're doing the cultural festivals and we're starting to build that up. So I think we're definitely on the right track, but again, constant community connection is really what's going to hold and bind our city together. So thank you.
Okay.
Well, Matt, I also wrote down that our goals need to include a rubric or a way to measure our success and establish those goals so that we can measure our success. Of course, we can look back and we did and list all the things that we've done over the last 10 years, and we need to ask residents if they think we've been successful. Mm-hmm. And if we have fallen short, then we need their help to discover why. I wrote down the same Temecula, but more of it and better. We want to preserve so many great things about the city, and the small town feel is probably the most important thing. And we do that. It's intentional, and it takes a lot of work to do that. And, we can thank Community Services for all the events they put on that attract families. Our police officers are patrolling their zones, and they build relationships with the businesses and the residents in those zones, and I think that helps a lot too. All the nonprofit organizations that we have and how we engage them, so they definitely need to be part of this discussion. So I said, expanded engagement and greater engagement, and I think we've just discussed that. Virtually allowing people to participate virtually, I think will be huge. And then every other way that we engage now. And one thing that we are working on right now is seeing, are there any segments of our community that are left out, or they're not properly addressed in a way that they can receive information and respond to information. Believe it or not everybody has a computer. So, and then the other thing is, as we go along, websites and computer things seem to get more technical, and I think we need to find a way to make them less technical and easier and more user-friendly too. So, really expand it, the same Temecula, but more of it and better.
Great. These are all really great ideas that will inform the engagement also.
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Madam Mayor. So for me, this engagement process is really the prerequisite. It's in defining and achieving the goals. How we handle this engagement process will essentially define what we see on paper when this Qlmp comes out. So for me, what are your desired outcomes for the process? So just for the community to be heard, the entire community to be heard. I mean, that should be an outcome, right? You want to make sure that the entire population is heard, and then ultimately trust the community. And it kind of goes to your point of, sort of, more of Temecula. If you sort of listen to Perry Peters, and is awfully prophetic in what he says, is we haven't really diverged from that very much, and that's great. And I don't suspect that's going to be the case 20 or so years from now. So the actual engagement activities, what would I like us to consider? We need to be flexible. The most important thing for me is we need to meet the community where they are. Oftentimes, if we're talking about, I'll just use a crosswalk, for example. We'll have a meeting at 7 o'clock on a Thursday night. Well, we need to meet the people where they are, and that's in the community, right? That's where they are. So if we need to set up on a trail, if we need to set up at the farmer's market, like I heard, we need to be embedded in the community. I think that's so important. Years ago, when we were going through the Uptown Jefferson specific plan, I was a part of that process as a resident. And I'd come down here, multiple times on a Thursday night at 6 o'clock, and it's essentially the same places over and over and over and over for the process. So meeting that community where they are, meeting the youth in their schools, whether it's through some of the AB classes or the IB classes or the AP classes, or as an RTA member, I've taken RTA meetings to middle schools, and we've met and had a meeting at a school, right? And you get that engagement. Now, it takes a little more effort to do that, but I think the information you get back is tenfold. I think it's so important that those kids, the seniors, whoever it is, wherever we're meeting them, it's just much more genuine and raw data than...
It's a safe environment for them.
It is a safe space. And a lot of the information we pulled out from those RTA meetings from meeting at middle schools, or if you go in and you talk to an IB class and have these pretty raw discussions, is you're getting really good information. So I think that's important piece of that engagement. Also leaning on technology, and people do prefer Zoom. I mean, there are opportunities. So I feel like, if you go back a couple slides and you look at the Blue Ribbon Committee, it's extremely diverse. If you look at, some of the roles and what that looks like, actually what's in this document, it's very solid, and I'm really happy to see where we're going with this. Those just sort of additional items for me are extremely important. So, thank you.
Great, thank you.
All right, for me, I kind of agree with Matt. I think the questions need to be a little bit more concise, and that would give us a lot more abilities to focus on the future. I mean, because there's a lot of feel-good questions. How do you feel about this? So I'd like to see some questioning that was a little bit more pointed, and such as infrastructure. If you say, do you like traffic here or not traffic? Obviously that's an easy answer. But I think once you drill down and say, okay, here are the infrastructure projects that are taking place in the next 2 years. And they're starting here, they're going to end here. Based on these projects being completed, what are your infrastructure needs? Because I think a lot of people don't realize what's in the pipeline.
They don't.
And I think by offering them the answer before you ask the question, then it makes them think outside the box and makes them go someplace that they came in with this focus, I hate my roads, and, we're fixing them next year. Okay, now it gives them another opportunity to say, okay, what else don't you like, about infrastructure? What have we not thought of that maybe you're thinking of? And so I would love to see that in this survey being a little bit more concise. That'll give us a lot more information that we can use for future projects and focus. So that's the only thing when I was reading the survey. I don't know what the questions, if that was the exact question, or if it was kind of a little broad. And so I would like to see maybe a little bit more narrowed focus, and make them think a little harder.
Yeah, and it sounds like, so the questionnaires or the community surveys that we would be doing are not like the one that Dr. McClarney did. There would be a little bit more qualitative, and I think that what I'm hearing also is that there's information that needs to be shared so that the community is able to provide the right type of information that will inform an implementable plan too. So I think that makes sense, where they probably need to know a little bit more before they can respond to a question.
Yes,
right?
I think that's key. And therein again lies the challenge. You know, how do we disseminate that information? It's the same question. So, but we really need to overcome that. We need to overcome that challenge.
Yeah, it sounds like communication and the feedback loops are important too, or will be important. Additional remarks, I think we're near our break time. I'll turn it over to staff, but I think 10:30 was the time that we wanted to take a break. Is that still the plan? Do we want to break out and then come back, or do we,
I would
we want
like
to
to
keep
take
going?
a break.
We need to take a break?
Yeah.
Okay. Think,
Great.
anything else?
Yeah.
10 minutes? 10 minutes, fine?
Five or 10?
Okay.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
They're doing it.
If you could find your way back to your seats, I think we're ready to start again.
Yes, Madam President, we will go back to our seats. Fine.
I came in my tennis clothes today.
I was at the board. I had to conduct the meeting, so I had to. Oh.
Oh, yeah, great. It's like one of as long as you're smiling, we're okay.
I know, that's all that matters.
Yeah. I would just add, I'm really impressed at the amount of writing he can get on that piece of paper, and it's actually legible and everything.
Thank you very much, everyone. I think we're ready to resume. I think everyone had a good break there. So this is our last major segment for the workshop, and in this segment, we'd like to focus really on the future and the vision and what we see as some of the key trends going forward that are going to affect the city and the goals that you may have. And I wanted to briefly highlight from the existing Qlmp, in 2010, there were a number of trends that were identified as potential drivers of change at that time. And so a lot of the content of the document was intended to respond to some of these kinds of trends. There's a lot of focus here, as you'll notice, on shifting demographics, the aging of the population, also considerations of how the city will develop out, and changes in housing preferences, different kinds of housing, evolving employment opportunities, so the idea that the economy would change over time, the rise of the green economy, more focus on environmental qualities, access and use of sophisticated communications technology. So that's something we've talked about already this morning a fair amount. And in addition, at the bottom there was even consideration of the fact that fires and drought would be continuing events the city would need to deal with. So we wanted to put this up as kind of a framing slide to have you think about, how are some of these things changed? What are some additional things going forward that maybe we need to consider? And along those lines, I wanted to just share a few trends for the last 10 years, just to think about how the city actually has evolved since 2010 over the last 8 to 10 years. So just first of all, looking at population growth from 2011 to 2021, coming out of the last recession, the city actually was growing at a fairly rapid clip, population-wise, 1.6% per year for the first 5 years there. But then in the last 5 years, coming to the current year, that's tailed off quite a bit to less than 0.5% a year. So thinking about the next 10 to 20 years, what do we think the growth dynamics will be for the city and the rate of development that might occur? In terms of the age of the population, this is definitely a trend that came to pass. So that large bar at the top there is the percent growth in people who are 65 years and older. So that group grew 88% over the last 10 years, or at least through 2019. And you'll see that the 30 to 39 age group grew quite a bit, but the younger age groups have not. So folks who were 20 to 29 at that time grew into their 30s, but then there hasn't been the same growth in the younger population. So even though we know young people are a major segment of the population, the growth trends there have not been the same. So definitely there has been an aging of the population here over the last 10 years. In terms of housing distribution, in 2011, there was roughly an 80 to 20 split between single-family housing and multifamily housing. But in the new housing that's been developed over the last 10 years, nearly 40% of that has been multifamily housing. So there has been a trend toward more diverse kinds of housing types in the city. In terms of jobs, and again, this is coming out of the last recession, so some of this job growth may have been recovering jobs that were lost in the 2009 recession, but leading the way has actually been tourism. Accommodations and food services has had the largest job growth, but then right behind that is healthcare and social assistance, which was a trend that was recognized going forward. But in terms of changing the economy, a number of these other sectors, although the job totals are lower, the percent change has actually been fairly rapid, and that includes information technology, professional and technical services, admin support, which is basically office development, and also construction. So there has been an evolution in the city economy and the jobs that are available. So those are just a few of the trends that we've begun to identify. And again, as we go through the process, we'll be looking at more of these indicators to update the Blue Ribbon Committee on changes for each of the core values. But at this point, we'd like to kick it back to the council for your prognostications on what you think some of the key trends are going forward. And I'll turn it back to Esmeralda.
So for this section, we have quite a bit to get through, so we're kind of looking forward into 2040 and starting to understand your vision. So for the first question is, given what has been shared and your thoughts about trends that we should be considering, what's important for us to look ahead in 2040 in terms of the quality of life and what should be preserved? What's important to the council?
You ready, Jess?
I think I'm ready. I think one of the things, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. One of the things that really come to mind, and we keep circling back to this a lot again, is that small town feel. Now I know that I'm pretty sure the number is 135,000 is kind of where we want to have as far as the population here in Temecula. And so for me, there's concern of going above that. There's concern that if we're forced into a higher population of more people here, it's going to create more problems on the roads, which obviously is our number one issue right now, according to the community. And so that's number one, is just making sure that what we have kind of laid out is using our land correctly and not going above and beyond for the populations as too much to really create that high density. Again, we want to keep a small town feel. We're not looking to be San Diego. We're not looking to be New York or LA or any of those places. So that being said, you know, one of the things that really points out here to me as I'm looking at the population change by age, if we can just go back to that slide real quick. Sure. You know, looking here as we see that the ages 20 to 29, and please somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, we have 16.1% of these individuals that have not returned. And when I really look at today's day and age, though, when we look that families aren't starting out at that age anymore. We don't have young families and kids coming in at those ages. Normally, the parent or these kids are going to school. They're getting higher educations. They're doing a lot more things outside. But I love the fact that Temecula has been bringing in the colleges to draw that in. So I think that's definitely a plus. But again, I know Stu is pretty big on bringing those technical services and trades in as well. And I think that's going to be a really important area to consider, bringing in more of those or keeping more of those individuals here as well. But I think that that's a big part of that, in my opinion. So just really, again, just to reiterate, you know, keeping our population, that we're not maxing out to be a big city, and that we're able to hold the population that we have. And then for health reasons and also for traffic, and then also just looking towards families or this age group and how we can continue to grow, keeping them here and yet still keeping that family first.
Right there.
I think what Jessica just said on the aging, I think that's something we need to be cognizant of and work on. I think the aspect of what we'd like to preserve, of course, is that small town feel, right? The quality of life, those key metrics that we've identified as being Temecula, right? So I think the original Qlmp helped define some of that, but I'd like to see this plan, again, with the specificity of identifying, real measurable versions of those questions. So that's what I'd like to see moving forward. The trends that are concerning have to do with the aging population, right? So if we're not attracting or you see that movement of folks 20 to 29 out of the city, we need to figure out pretty quick what's driving that, right? Kids are getting out of high school and they're moving, or is there just that age group doesn't see Temecula as a desirable location, so they're not coming here. Higher ed and workforce development training is important, but I think the other piece is people need to, including the kids that are growing up here, need to see Temecula as a place that you can start and end at, right? So that there's an opportunity for you, depending on your career path and what you want to do, to grow up here, but also continue to work here, and then ultimately retire here as well, right? And I think that we have a lot of those pieces of that puzzle in place, but I mean, we're only a few decades old, so we don't have everything perfectly. So I would say the workforce development and training aspect is going to be really critical to us. And then going back to the housing piece, I mean, it's not surprising that the 20 to 29-year-old age group isn't spending a lot of time moving to Temecula, because who's gonna buy, I mean, what's our median house price now? It's over $500,000. So, what 22-year-old is like, oh yeah, I definitely want to encumber myself with a $500,000 mortgage right now, right? I mean, just physically, they just, that opportunity doesn't exist. So we need to think a little bit more about the housing stock and that portfolio that we do have, and be able to provide those opportunities. And we've been talking quite a bit about this with Luke and others, is that opportunity for folks to get into that. You don't see starter homes the way you used to, right? I had a starter home. It was just over 1,000 square feet. It was unfortunate because that starter home in San Diego cost over $500,000 at the time, and it was ridiculous to think about. And I was clever enough to buy it, during one of the worst economic periods, and increases, and lost my shorts on that. But the good news is we have an opportunity to kind of hit that reset button here, and we still have, one of the things that was listed earlier is that housing or that land stock, the decisions we make today on that last 15% or so of raw land, that's going to define our future moving forward. So if we mess that up now, we've messed it up for a generation. So if we don't really start contemplating what that looks like now and giving folks the opportunity to start their lives here at that age, or continue their lives here if they choose to, we're missing a huge opportunity. And the last piece, of course, is the seniors. I thought it was disappointing that Perry Peters ultimately moved from Temecula in his older years, because we didn't have the kinds of services and support he needed for the kind of housing he needed at that age. And that was one of the reasons I brought the senior master plan forward years ago, was because I was like, here's, one of the founders. I mean, we've got these videos and, this amazing gentleman. And, there were other issues related to that family and other things that helped make that decision for him. But I always thought, God, what a missed opportunity. Here's a, one of the fathers of Temecula that couldn't spend, his senior years living in our community. We need to do better than that.
Thank you.
Well, I agree, and I believe that it's the housing prices that really do drive the shifts in influx of new residents and, people who move out. And we talked about high density. Well, high density is what you need for those, and I don't mean high, cramming in like a housing project or anything, but it's condos and nice family-size apartments. And that's what those families are going to need because they can't afford, anything else right now. And I don't anticipate that housing prices will tank again. I'm sure they'll go down, but I don't expect them, I don't think we'll ever see, $300,000 or $250,000 for a median household price again. So we have to think about how are we going to provide if we want those populations and we want to care for seniors. And I just don't want to warehouse seniors. I want seniors to have activities and opportunities, and really they should have a chance that where they live shouldn't be a burden to them, so that they can get out and do other things, really. So their living facilities should facilitate having a better lifestyle, out with the public. So we're going to have to change our thinking if we want younger people here, which is good for the school districts, because right now enrollment's declining because we aren't getting any young families. High school enrollment is going up, and middle school to some degree, but elementary school is not. If we want to attract younger and care for our seniors, we're going to have to talk about higher density housing, where and it's going to be nice condos and nice family apartments with spaces for kids to play and play areas. And I think the mindset of the young people today is, I don't know that a lot of them want houses with big yards like we did. My son spent way enough time on riding lawnmower in his youth to probably never want to mow grass again. So I think they have a different idea of, it's more of an urban setting. So then I look to what we're going to do with Uptown Temecula. And I think that's where we have an opportunity to attract, that age group. And because it'll be a walking district, maybe it's something that can serve seniors. So obviously the thing that we want to preserve today is, the small town feel. And we do that because of the demographic of the population. So housing we've got to pay attention to housing. And we've got to provide for the demographic that we want to stay here and we want to care for. Our younger families and seniors. So it's going to require more higher density housing, or at least closer, they'll live in closer quarters. Go ahead, Zach.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I feel like, and I don't mean this in any disrespectful way, but if you don't say public safety and small town feel, somehow you don't want those things. And I don't want that to be misconstrued.
Yeah, sure.
But what does that mean, right? What does small town feel mean? I grew up in a legitimate small town of less than 5,000 people.
Me too.
And I can tell you, our city has a quote unquote better small town feel than that town ever had, right?
Really?
So it's really thinking about what does that look like, and it's different for everyone. I'm struggling with some of this data that stops at 2018, 2019. We're in 2021 now, and again, I mentioned it earlier, COVID has drastically shifted a lot of the things that are happening in our community. So I don't know that we have a legitimate, clear picture of sort of migration habits and things like that. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that, 20 to 29-year-olds aren't coming back, right? And you brought it up, they can't afford to live here. The economy doesn't offer them, the local economy doesn't offer them what they need for their needs. So we need to really think about that and what does that mean? And having a segment of our population leave, it really weakens our community as a whole. I know the more successful neighborhoods are neighborhoods where young and old grow up together and they interact together. And if I have an older couple living next to me, I know my home is probably safer for it because they're home a lot and they're at their window and they're making sure everything's okay on the street, right? And when they need help, I'm there to help them.
Of course.
So those are things we really need to think about of what does that look like going forward.
That's how babysitters are born.
Yeah. So it's, that's important to sort of understand the whys, right? Like our family, we'll be sending off our daughter to college, and if you if she were here, she would tell you there's no way she's coming back. That should be an alarm for us, right? That should be an alarm. I want my children to come back after school because the education opportunities here locally aren't as diverse as they need to be. We have a great thing going in our community. I want to make sure that everyone is able to come back. Some of those things are just out of our control. The economy is out of our control. If you look at the 2010, we were in the midst of a recession at that time, and the housing data in here is completely different now, 10 years later. So just being mindful of that. I do think when we look at housing stock, we need to really think about micro apartments, micro for sale units to really provide a space for everyone that wants to live here, that can live here, because things are changing. My son now, our youngest son, enjoys mowing for like twice now. I don't think it's going to go much beyond that. So again, things are changing, right? So when I look at those questions, I certainly want us to preserve and strengthen what we have, and what that means to our entire community is different. But it's collectively where we stand, right? And we all don't have to agree on everything, but the idea that we collectively stand on these principles that are outlined in the 2010 plan are really that foundation for us. Future trends, I think we really need to be mindful of the environment. I think climate change, whether you think it's man-made or not, however you define that, our climate is changing. I've never experienced the amount of humidity in Temecula that we've experienced in the last several years. Those weather patterns are changing. So what does that mean for us with our facilities and even transportation, emergency planning? Transportation is a huge one. We talk a lot about traffic. No one likes traffic. It's just like a reality. No one enjoys sitting in traffic. But how we mitigate that, we really need to rethink that. Adding capacity isn't always going to solve, and quite honestly doesn't ever genuinely solve transportation traffic. So we need to really think about that. We can move to an all-electric future, but people are still driving to Old Town in electric vehicles and still struggling to find parking. So we really need to look at what does it mean to have mobility? What does it mean to get around our city? And again, that's active transportation. That's investing in public transportation. I think for me, staffing at the city level is important when we talk about those things, talking about having someone dedicated to active transportation, to public transportation, to really work within the community to provide those things. Again, sort of going back to the environment and what does that mean for our future. That's, I think, about where I'm at right now. So.
Now, we're talking like it's very, things are dire. And in some situations, when we talk about the demographic shift, that is a concern. But I will interject this, that the school district has more than 200 teachers who have come back, who have graduated from TVUSD and have come back to work here. So I think that's great. If we could achieve that same result with other aspects of the community, it'd be great. But the school district's doing really well. Go ahead, Stu.
All right, well, just keeping the small town feel rolling. You know what? My kids, I have 3 adult kids, they all moved out of Temecula from about age 19 till about 25, 26. Yeah. And that was when they got married, started having kids. Yeah. And guess where they wanted to move to? Temecula. Yep. So, I think it's the get out of Mayberry mentality. That, they're in this environment, we're in the Temecula bubble, and they just feel like they want to experience something different. And that's why they flight out. But once they start having kids and they experience where they flew to, they want to fly back.
And so much better.
So I'm not concerned about that demographics moving out. What I'm more concerned about is that senior demographic that's moving out. Because especially with the economic value of their homes today, they're cashing out. And a lot of them are just leaving because there is no senior communities to move to in Temecula. There's several in Marietta. You got the Hot Springs, you've got the one off of Cal Oaks, I can't think of the name of it now. But anyways, you've got several communities up in Marietta, and I've had several of my customers, actually, that's where they're moving, up there. You know, we have maybe one or two that I would consider independent living, you know. The one off of Heritage Park, that's another one I talk to a lot of people. And because it's, you own your place, you live there, you're independent. And that's something that I think we kind of missed on that demographic is there really isn't a whole lot of senior communities, and the value of their property right now is so strong that I think if we did this survey again, we'd see that number shifted a lot. And so, yeah, so as far as future trends, I think we got to look at crime. I think we got to look at especially property crime, because I've been a victim 3 times in the last 4 months. And so, and I'm not, we catch them, but it's a catch and release program at the prison system. So it's like we've got to think outside the box. What can we as the city leaders, what can we do to somehow raise that electric fence around the Temecula bubble? What do we need to do to make it undesirable for criminals to use us as their victims? So I think that's going to be a major thing we're going to have to consider in the next 20 years. And so, and I think that, to me, going forward, we really need to focus on what can we do as a city to increase that level of protection. Because I don't the state is dropping the ball. Oh. This is not Riverside Sheriff. This is not any kind of a departmental anything. It's the laws that are on the books protect the criminals. Yep. And makes us the victims in perpetuity. So we have to do something as a city to correct that. You know, whatever we can do legally, however we can raise that, I don't know. But that's something we really need to focus on in the next 20 years.
Mr. City Manager, how many senior living facilities do we have? Because I know we had some in the pipeline, so.
Yeah, there are what we'll call age-restricted housing in the city limits. I don't know off the top of my head if, Luke, you know how.
Yeah, I don't know the exact number, but there's Highgate, there's the Vineyards over by Chaparral. There's a new facility that was just built just behind kind of Home Depot on the south side of town. And of course, the Generations Project, which is a huge development, is approved.
Somers Bend has some age-restricted housing.
Somers Bend has some age-restricted housing.
On the northeast side.
Yeah, there's upwards of 2,000 units of senior housing that's available within the city right now.
So it's coming, but looking at the numbers and the trends that we're looking at, you know, we're gonna, I mean, it's direly needed. So, does that make you feel better, Stu? Because I lost track of how many. We had so many in the pipeline, I didn't know.
Well, it seems like all the ones that we have in the pipeline or has been built recently are more of apartment-style assisted living facilities. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about freestanding, I live in my house, you live in your house, and that kind of community. That's what we don't see here. Where, like I said, you know, like the Hot Springs, that's a perfect example of a very large, well-managed, laid out senior community that is, in my opinion, I'd live there. You know, I mean, it's beautiful. Every time I go visit someone there, it's like, dang, this is nice up here.
You can't get in.
No, so, you know, and that's the kind of thing. I mean, Heritage Park is the closest thing to that. Yeah. You know, in Temecula. And that's the thing that I'm, you know, I don't plan to live in one for a long time, but anyways, that's and what we've got going, yes. I mean, that is senior living, but it's more of an assisted living / 1 foot.
Really what you're talking about is housing that's affordable for seniors, right? Yeah. Right? Yeah. And the same thing would hold true for the younger population too. Zach, go ahead.
Yeah, and I don't really want to beat this down into a dead horse or beat a dead horse or anything, but the idea that you know, aging in place, I think, is the most important thing. We can talk about aging in place and what that means. That means your existing home, whether you bought it, you know, 30 years ago or not, is a place that you can live and you can, again, age in place. It's important. And wraparound services from healthcare to transportation, all those things matter on choices and when people decide to whether or not to age in place or not. And I do think age-restricted housing has its place. But I think when you talk about the health of a community, it's genuinely in that you have a broad mix of people living on the same street, that's where you get that small town feel, because you all know each other and you're helping each other and you're working towards a common goal. So, again, aging in place is an important component of seniors and their life, their older years in our community.
Thank you for being sensitive about saying old age.
I'm very thoughtful of that.
So, I mean, what we're getting from all of this is that we need to have a variety of housing types, in various locations, and obviously, and some people want to stay in. I want to stay in my house forever. Some people don't want to. So, and I think, we've made a good point that we just need to be cognizant of the diversity of housing that we're going to need.
Yeah, and there's quite a few themes that we're hearing here, so thank you for the input here. We have two segments of our visioning discussion remaining, so we want to make sure we get to them. So let me flip to the next slide here. So understanding that this is our starting point, this framework here, your core values from the last Qlmp, excuse me, we want to just check in with the group to see if this is a good starting point to work with the Blue Ribbon Committee and the community, inclusive of these, and then the potential additional equity core values. So I wanted to put this out to the group about whether this is a good starting point, anything you want to add or discuss, and then we'll move on to the projects, which is our next discussion point.
Anybody want to comment? I'm thinking of anything that anything new that has come up that we should add, but.
And understanding that there were comments earlier about the plan update should include more detailed specific metrics and things like that. So these are high level, but this is what we want to become our starting point as we start talking to the community and the Blue Ribbon Committee. So again, if these still resonate with the group, we just want to make sure that we're on track.
Well, is healthy and healthy living and livable city and economic prosperity, is that a broader way, and does the employment or the job market fall under that?
It could. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Matt.
Well, I think the one thing that's missing here is the identity, right? I mean, we were talking earlier, Kevin and I, about New Orleans, right? And New Orleans' identity wasn't created in its first, 32 years of it being a city, right? It happened over a long period of time. And so I've heard a lot of conversation about what Temecula's identity is, small town feel. We've listed those things: the tourism, the wine country, all of those key aspects. But that isn't a core value of ours, and I think it probably should be.
And really, when we think about it, small town feel comes from the people. Comes with the way you interact with your neighbors, how you participate in volunteer, how you serve your city. It's really the people who are here. But we have to continue to make those opportunities for people to gather and get to know each other and trust each other and help and serve each other.
But I think it's a one step farther, right? So you sort of take that hierarchy of safety first, and then health, all of the sort of hierarchy of what it means to be comfortable and move forward as a society, and one of those later steps includes arts and cultural programs, and I don't see that on our list yet either. So as a city, are we still struggling with the safety aspect and some of the basics, or are we at a place where we can add that to our core values? And I mean, we have don't get me wrong, we have community service programs, but is that a core value at this point, and have we achieved a solid enough foundation to include that? And I would argue that we have, right?
Well, if you're not safe, nothing else matters. That has to be first and foremost. And I think of community services as a means of providing, I see that as the opportunities, it provides the opportunities for people to engage and connect and learn to care for each other. And it also makes you feel like you have a sense of ownership in the city because you're actively participating, you're giving back, and you're helping to make decisions, which is what we need. I mean, the council needs that. So is that a core value, though? Is it?
Well, I think it can be. I mean, it can be whatever we want it to be, right? I mean, if we choose to make that a core value, that's, and again, I'm looking at it, so, is anybody here from Murrieta? I know Bob is. Okay, I'm going to apologize in advance for this comment. But,
be very, very careful.
Be very careful treading forward. But, Murrieta went through a sort of visioning process a short while ago, looking for their own identity, right? It was, they've had these names in the past, the Jewel of the Valley and that kind of thing. And you ask yourself, well, what does that actually mean, right? I think Temecula got lucky in that our identity was tied in with Old Town and wine country and Pachanga and other features, right? And so we derive, I think, a lot of benefit from having sort of a pre-made identity for us. But again, when I talk about, like the small town and so forth, I think we need to, make that, are we Southern California wine country? Is that who we are moving forward? Is that the identity we want as a core value? Because that has set our stage to create a, $1 billion plus tourism economy, right? So do we, add that as a core value at this point? And if so, what does that core value look like? And again, feeding back into small town, feel, if we're adopting the issues related to, quality of life and public safety and, wine country and all of those things that go along with our identity into community services program, then we need to make sure our community services program feeds into that identity. But going back to Murrieta, they went through this process of re-envisioning themselves, and we saw the latest version of that brochure or whatever that they were doing, and it was like Murrieta, is adjacent to stuff that's fun and engaging. I mean, that's really what they concluded with, and I thought, what a missed opportunity to really rebrand yourselves and identify, we're going to be the public health sector for, Southwest Riverside County. We're going to be, and really come up with that core, economic and community driver of who you are moving forward. And I think this is our opportunity to do the same. So if we don't give that guidance now and say we are 100% invested in this thing moving forward, how do we define that? And I think that's, that I personally would be one of the biggest accomplishments to this list of other stuff, and kind of throws an umbrella around, a lot of the other activities we do.
It's a fact that if we do not define our identity, that other people will. So, and, sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't work out. So we definitely need to play a role in that. And we have been very lucky because of, wine country and everything. So I think we just need to decide what's a definition, what are we using as a definition of a core value? I mean, in your head, you know what it is, but how do we determine, of those things you just talked about, what qualifies as a core value? If it's a standalone, if it's a standalone identity or function or method, does that make it a core value? I don't know.
I mean, the good news is we don't have to define it today, right? So
No,
we've got,
we don't.
we've got months to figure it out.
Yeah.
One of the things, if you don't mind me just interjecting, is, again, going back to the original, even the mission statement of why the Qlmp was started. And so just the mission statement here that was originally made was protecting, preserving our beauty here in Temecula, honoring historic past, enhancing our community, education, cultural life, and being vibrant, modern, and a small town atmosphere. So it was there in the beginning, it's just maintaining that. But I do love your vision on being able to implement that and making it important, because I think to the people here in Temecula, it is vital. It's a vital thing. And again, going back to even what we were seeing with the negative amount of people in that age graph, kids do not, well, I'll be honest with you, they don't want to stay here in a small town. But that's not, I think Zach had said it's not a bad thing. They come back, or maybe it was Stu. A lot of them. They really do. And so I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's going to bring cultural, I think it's going to be even more beneficial for our city for that. But getting back, I think the small town atmosphere is so important, and obviously everybody wants it because there's just too much big things going on outside. But getting back to the mission statement, I think that's where we really need to focus, go back to the root of everything and continue to dive into that and keep moving.
Temecula more and better.
Yes, yes.
You got something, Zach?
Yeah, sure. So I'll just sort of add to it, and Mayor Pro Tem Ron, I like where you're going with that, with the identity. I struggle with, a city like New Orleans, probably didn't sit around several hundred years ago and talk about how to frame their identity, right? It just was organic. Those things happen organically, and I think if we add that to this, this will sort of organically happen at that community level, and I do think it's important. I think you look at it from an economic perspective. You can look at it just from a pride perspective of your community and whatnot. So, I'm certainly looking forward, I guess, to the community having that discussion. When I hear small town feel, I just, what does that mean?
Well, to me, it means what I grew up with, and that was a town of 3,000 people where I had 1,500 mothers.
Yeah. So when you sort of break it down, right, it's like knowing your neighbors, it's like feeling safe in your community, it's being able to go where you want, and it's very all-American, right, in that quote-unquote all-American sense, right, because we have, these like parades and concerts in the park, and, we were just at the one on Thursday night, and gosh, that feels like really small town feel, right, when I see people that I've known in the community forever, and so,
That is part of it.
Like defining that to me would be an important component of that. If we go down this path, like defining what that means, because we say it, but we all have slightly different understanding or belief structure behind what that means. And the question, I don't believe you've put it up yet, but it asks if this is a good starting point, adding a new equity core value. So, and I would say yes to that. The question is the existing framework of core values plus a new equity core value an effective starting point for engaging the Blue Ribbon Committee and the community? So to answer that, I would say yes, absolutely. So identity, equity, adding those components to this discussion, this framework is important. And so my answer to that is yes. But again, trying to understand what does it mean to be a small town? Does it mean, having an old car? Does it mean riding a bicycle or, riding a horse? What does that mean? What is that manifestation at that neighborhood level? So, listen, we love living here. We've lived here for 20 plus years, and we love those things about it, those things that you can't really put your finger on, right? But it's walking out your door and, talking to your neighbors while you check the mail, or seeing a teacher that taught your kids, 15 years ago kind of thing. So it's all those components. It's walking down Front Street and saying hi to friends you haven't seen in a while because you're in this walkable environment that's robust and just a fun place to be, or seeing people at the Merc or the theater or whatnot. So these are all important things to that small town feel. It's the totality of everything we've done over the last 30 years that's provided that. And I think, again, to go back to this, it's an effective starting point.
And it's the activities that the city intentionally puts on for the community. Parades are typically, you can imagine your small town parade. When somebody says parade, I don't think of Macy's. I think of our parade or little tiny Cameron, Missouri, where I grew up, as the parade, because it's all the home folks. There's hardly anybody on the curb because everybody's in the parade. So, and I think it's a combination of everything that we do to make Temecula better. I think that's, what everybody loves.
I totally agree. I think there needs to be a seventh core value, and it has to be something about maintaining and fostering the hometown feel or something like that. Because, just like Zach was saying, if you've never been to the concerts in the park, It is crazy
Yeah,
cool.
it's
I
really
mean,
fun.
people are dancing in front of the stage, you know. I walked through the crowd. I was taking some video because I put a lot of videos on my Facebook page. And, you know, I got stopped like 20 times. And not just by people. These were people I knew, you know, from 1 year to 30 years, you know. So I think, you know, and even when someone comes to visit from out of town, I put them in my El Camino or in my Jeepster, and we cruise through Old Town.
Oh, yeah,
And
we
it's
do
like
too.
American Graffiti. They go away from visiting me in Temecula is like, oh my gosh, you guys got the coolest town. And so everybody feels it. I mean, everybody who visits here knows it. They know that small town feel. And the cool factor in Temecula is off the chart. So I think it's just all about maintaining that and making sure that doesn't ever leave. And so whatever that takes, and that's, you know, that's up to you guys to kind of drill down with your questions. And, you know, so I think we do need a seventh value. I agree with Matt.
Yeah,
We
I
got to
like it.
somehow quantify it and put it on paper. So.
But you know what that says? That says that they don't take it for granted. And I really love that.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of things people take for granted, and they do not take that for granted.
Yeah.
So one of the questions is, can we do a public survey to see, because exactly like Zach said, there's so many people who have different ideas of what that looks like. So can we possibly do a public survey incorporating all that to find out exactly what these people want to see as a small town? Because it will change when the next generation comes up. But as of right now, how they perceive it. So we as city council members can do exactly what they're wanting as our.
Yeah, absolutely. And as part of the process, since this is an update and you have a great foundation with the existing Qlmp, this will start to inform our tools and methods to elicit input from the community. And the other thing that I've heard throughout your discussion is that you want to make sure you reach out to everyone. And even though we're coming out of an interesting last year and a half where we were doing a lot of Zoom meetings, that has provided an additional tool for folks who maybe otherwise would not have been engaged. So we have a lot of tools in our toolkit to be able to draw from, to be able to reach out to as many people as possible and ask them all of the relevant questions so that they can inform you all, and then what needs to be included in this update to the plan. So with that, we'd like to get into specific projects, plans, or programs that you're interested in or that are important for the city to consider in this plan update. And that's our final agenda point, and then I think we're going to kick it back to public comment, or back to the mayor. So plans, projects, programs.
Stu, you want to go first? You're not ready yet?
Are you talking in respect to what you guys are going to do, or are you talking in respect to what the city needs to do?
City. So I heard during the milestone or accomplishments discussion, like there were a lot of topics related to infrastructure, things that improvements, trails, open space, all of that. So.
Well, I think what the city needs to do for the future is to communicate all the projects that we have in the pipeline right now, because literally everything everybody's complaining about or wants or desires is already in the pipeline.
Yep.
And so I think the city could do a really, I don't want to say better job, but I think we could do a better job of communicating what is in the future for Temecula. And I think that would actually create, our satisfaction survey was really good. I think if they heard and saw the projects that were coming up, it'd be even better. So that's all I can think of.
Zach, go ahead.
All right, well, I'll sort of jump right in. And, when you go back to this timeline of what we've done and what's still out there, there's a lot on this list that we've completed, right? There's a lot that we haven't. So for me, going forward, some of the projects that I think are very important to the future of the city, and I'll just start at the larger level, is the Jefferson area, Jefferson specific plan, I think is going to be a driver for change in our community going forward. I think we need to, and I know it's baked into the plan, but we talk about transportation choices, giving people legitimate choices. There's a reason that people don't ride public transit, because it's not very good, to be honest, Not many people walk and bike. And even though we do have some of these things at that hyper-local level, they don't connect, right? So you might ride along the Great Oak Trail in south side of our town, and then you have this really fantastic trail, but it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't genuinely connect you to anything. So going forward for me, I think some of those things are more complete streets, active transportation, investment in public transportation. Those are good services that provide for younger folks in our community as well as our aging population as well. Specifically, with respect to youth sports and sports in general, and just wanting to encourage folks to be active, but also use it as an economic engine, is gymnasiums, right? Or some sort of like higher level sports complexes that where we can attract larger tournaments here, right? And so we have one gym in our city, indoor gym. So I'd like to see us consider, I know it's on here, the Old Town Gym, but it was completed in 2017, I think, I kid, of course, it's not completed, but it's something that I want us to look forward. And maybe it's not in Old Town, and maybe it's somewhere else, but looking at providing a higher level of access to competitive sports facilities for our community, because look, sports is wildly popular, and it's a great way for people to be active. But then also, again, it's giving floor space to adults to play with their friends. Again, creating that small town feel of being able to go play pickup basketball with your friends. So those are the things. Connecting our loop system and our trails that genuinely connect. And again, I know we're working on these, to your point about some of the projects coming forward. We're in construction right now of 2 major projects that will connect parts of this loop trail to have a trail from right here in Old Town all the way out to through Somers Bend to Kayak and Tento and to the wine country, right? So those are important things. But then sort of drilling down to how does someone that lives in Crown Hill get to Old Town without their car, right? Like looking at those ways of, and maybe that's reshaping some of the roadways, maybe that's finding space for trails and whatnot. But again, it's investing in that long-term vision of mobility in the sense that it's not going to look like it did in the American Graffiti days forever, right? Like things are changing, and while most people still own a car, there's a large part of our population that don't, right? Mostly kids and seniors, right? So if we're truly going to look to our kids and our seniors, we want to level that playing field for them so that, again, they can age in place. So those are the key things for me we talk about, and that goes back to the environment, it goes back to public safety, it really goes back to all those core values, but just sort of kicking up these things a notch or two and bringing those to the forefront rather than sort of, maybe this will happen down the road, but really just putting that in front of the community and pushing that out and saying these things are valuable for our community. Thank you.
Okay, Matt?
Well, let's start with housing. I think it's already something we're talking about, so I think this will just, again, kind of throw an arm around it. But housing related to several of the key issues we've identified over the years. Oh, yeah. Thanks. The senior housing issue, clearly, we could be doing a better job with the portfolio and stock on that, and then the, 20-something, portfolio as well. So, and for first-time buyers and, economic, opportunities for folks to be able to, a lot of wealth building is through, property ownership. So giving that opportunity is important. Parking. And specifically downtown. Look, I get it. We've got studies that say we have plenty of parking and all of that kind of stuff. But, again, I think if we just walked around Old Town on a Friday night and said, hey, how was your parking experience here? Or on any event weekend, we're going to get more negatives than positives. So perception is reality. So either we do a better job of identifying, existing parking spaces, which I think we can do, or, just bite the bullet and say, okay, so we need a parking master plan for Old Town, and some sort of, whether it's a public-private partnership or something that helps create more opportunities here, especially for busy weekends and other events. Because when I say perception is reality, I think we talked about it last time, is folks, wanting to visit Temecula will pull in, see the line of cars and everything else, and just say, it's just not worth it. And so it's a missed opportunity. And so we don't want to be known as the city, of Southern California wine country with, terrible parking, right? So let's really, lean into that one as much as possible. The other programs for, and especially I think in Old Town, Performing Arts Center, I know it's on the list of things, but I think we really need to start thinking about how we build something of magnitude, right? Something that isn't just today's vision, but a 50-year vision of what that facility could be. And recognizing, look, we've got a lot of venues down here. We had a festival, 2 weekends ago with the Stampede. Maybe we should be looking at outdoor amphitheater type things and opportunities for Old Town that sort of centrally locate and make it a lot easier on police and fire to manage, rather than businesses just kind of doing their own thing in their parking lots. Like, let's make it a little bit more professional and a little bit more accessible. Let's see, along with that, the other things I'd like to see, it's on the plan, but we've never really done it, is that sort of Central Park concept, right? Having a piece of property, and I would just throw out here that Santiago and Inez is a great, it is just a dirt lot, and unless we want to get embroiled in litigation with the HOA and propose a project out there, it's a dirt lot. Why aren't we just actively pursuing some opportunity for community gardens in Central Park? It's a nice big parcel and beautiful area that could really tie into the neighborhoods and surrounding area, Inez, and into Old Town. There's probably other opportunities for that, but rather than just, because as long as I've been here, it's just been a dirt lot. Rather than just let it remain a dirt lot, let's start to do something with it. And it's not a massive investment. All we're talking about is, putting in some trails and trees and stuff, and getting the community more engaged in it. So
I wanted a water feature too.
Yeah, I'd love to see something happen out there, and then at least we're not driving by a dirt lot where you fill up your sandbags during a flood. We can do that anywhere.
Just a trip down memory lane. I
Right?
remember clearly, I said that exact same thing at my very first budget meeting as a council member in 2005.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
so it's been, and there it
16
is.
years later, let's
You
just do
betcha.
it. Let's just do it. I don't know, let's get it done. All right, and then the other one is the higher ed center. MSJC did a phenomenal thing by buying a $55 million piece of property that has close to 350,000 square feet, which, just to put it into perspective, 350,000 square feet, MSJC is building a STEM campus at their, San Jacinto facility. That's only 35,000 square feet, right? So we have 350,000 square feet, and we had all of this interest, and then COVID happened, and some of our partners like San Marcos and others kind of disappeared along the way. It's, as far as I know, still entitled for a third tower, which would bump that up to, another 200,000 square feet, this, and we've talked about this before, this is the model for higher education for Southern California. Well, for California, right? You have the workforce development training that gives folks an opportunity to do, automotive repair and, other, the trades. All the way through associate degree programs that link right across the hallway with your bachelor's degree and beyond. We had, my old law school coming up here interested in figuring out an opportunity to bring their programs up here as well. I know COVID kind of, screwed things up for everybody, but let's get that conversation started, because that could be there's no experience like that anywhere in the state right now.
Nope.
And we have this massive opportunity to build it. So let's not let MSJC, ultimately they put 55 into the land and facilities, another 55 into, upgrades. As spec'd out, you walk around that facility and some of those labs and everything that's created, we've got, easily at this point spec'd out a $200 million asset sitting in the middle of town that we need to get filled. So that would be, I think a massive priority for us to do that.
Great, thank you.
Jess?
All right, I'll finish it up. So a couple things, again, a couple of them I already had mentioned. Again, looking at the population with the police officers is going to be a big one, really just honing in again on public safety. Another area is that really came to my heart is more areas for teens to connect in a safe environment. So during school and also, during summertime, I know, Zach, you would know of somebody else. When I first moved here, I believe they have a bus that goes down to, like Harveston has a bus down to the beach. Just like things like that, like how incredible could we promote that for our teens and give them things to do, things like that, and families as well. So just things that can really incorporate them as well to not doing nothing and sitting on their Facebook and all that fun jazz all the time. The other thing I really feel that we haven't touched really deeply in is supporting our businesses a little bit more. We're just getting out of the dump of COVID, and so how can we ensure that next time, if there is a next time that this happens or something along those lines, that we are not going to be hit as hard and we'll be more prepared to help our small businesses and our nonprofits in the community so we don't lose the 300 and some on businesses as we did this last year and a half. So again, we don't have a crystal ball, but at the same time, I think there's things that we can learn from this last year and a half that we can just start, again, raising the bar and just be able to help them out more in that sense. The last thing would be, again, being a mom too, again, always going back to the family, is incorporating single moms. I think that's an area that we can work more on. I think there's things that moms are needing, and there's areas that help fulfill that, but I know that that is a definite area that is a small community that is a need. And so I think there's areas that we can help fulfill that too, so.
Matt, you want to add something?
What you said, I think important for us to contemplate a Healthy Communities Initiative. I mean, it's one thing to put in a hospital, but it's another to sort of move forward as a community and say, here's all the services and things and the gaps. It's nice that we have, a renowned neurosurgeon who comes to Temecula to provide just remarkable services. It would be even nicer if that renowned neurosurgeon lived in Temecula, right, and just didn't commute in here one day a week or something. I mean, if we're gonna really, focus in on growing this community and providing services, then, we need the Healthy Communities Initiative. We need folks to be more engaged. We need to highlight the services and build the services that we don't currently have. The cancer support programs that we have. That's wonderful. We need to spend more time, supporting that. Cardiac and stroke, mental and behavioral health. There's a lot of pieces to this puzzle that I think are incredibly important moving forward. So some sort of Healthy Communities Initiative and making sure that we're providing the expertise and the services locally so that our senior citizens don't have to travel down to San Diego to get a cataract surgery, right? I mean, so if they can't see well to begin with, how are they getting down? Come on, let's really figure out how to provide those kind of services. And the only other thing I'd say in our Qlmp, I know this is all about Temecula, but I think we need to be a little bit more outward facing as well and make sure that we're coordinating our opportunities and the growth and opportunities with Murrieta and Pechanga and other, folks. Sorry, what were you going to say? So just, make sure that this is more outward facing and that we're coordinating and not duplicating efforts either. And it goes to even like the homeless programs and so forth. I know we do a good job, within the city, and I know we invest more in that resource and program than, anywhere else. But it doesn't help from a law enforcement or other perspective if we're putting all that effort in, but our, adjacent communities are not, right? So we need to, sort of work with our neighbors and coordinate better.
Actually, Matt, we have a huge homeless task force and coalition, and it goes all the way up to Menifee. And I don't think Hemet is in it yet. And then all the way up the I-15. And the other cities they've adopted responsible compassion, so it's the same platform. But But not financially, yeah, they haven't put the same resources in. However, they've also adopted the same, ordinances and laws that we've established here too, just so, if they leave Temecula, they don't necessarily just automatically go to Murrieta anymore. But yes, I mean, everybody has to play an equal share, and we are putting more funding and effort into that than any city, anywhere that I know of. So I also mentioned the partner with neighboring cities, and we actually had a Southwest Cities Coalition for a number of years, and we used our combined strength to lobby in Sacramento and also to go to Washington, D.C. and talk about infrastructure, regional infrastructure that benefited all the cities up and down the I-15 and the 215 corridor. So it would be, on and off ramps, Lake Elsinore here, our 79 South, on and off ramp, things like that. And it was excellent because we would send letters to our representatives, or respective representatives, and it would be on the letterhead that included all of the cities. So it really gave us a lot more weight. And I'd like to see us really get back and, make that more active again. And then the other thing is we've been struggling with forming an economic development agency for years. And the EDC is, again, a coalition of businesses and cities. And it needs to be Riverside County also. And I think that we need to take a look at where the EDC is now, and if we need to coordinate that through the Southwest Coalition of Cities, I think we should. Economic development needs to be regional. We promote Temecula, Murrieta promotes Murrieta, but it helps all of us. When people come to Murrieta, they come to Temecula to shop, go to the movies, and come to Old Town. So I think we need to look at kickstarting that EDC again. And then I also talked about the relationship between MSJC and Cal State San Marcos. And as you know, the CSUs are going through horrific changes right now. But MSJC works so closely with Temecula Valley Unified School District. There are 4,000 students that take career tech education in our high schools, 4,000 CTE students. And MSJC articulates so many, and the school district articulate their courses. So if you take a CTE course and the final of the 3 years in TVUSD, you can move seamlessly into MSJC's first year of what they have. And the curriculum all matches and works together. And I don't see why, if we could find out what's up with CSUSM. I don't know if we've met with them lately, but higher universities, having a higher education center or a university in your city changes the culture of your city, and it really raises the bar because now you've got college professors living here, and then it's all the ancillary services that go along with supporting it, and that's going to be a huge center, so they're going to have a need for a lot of services. So I think we need to pursue that too. And then just for fun, I wrote down, have we thought about doing a third library? Because we have the Grace Melman Library and the Temecula Library, the Ron Roberts Library is the busiest library in the county, and maybe 2 counties. So I don't know if we need to take a look and see, because it's so popular. It's one of our greatest assets, I think, is our library. Residents use it all the time. Huh? Yeah, we could. Yeah, and Matt just said we could do it at MSJC's building, and that would be great. Plus, it would put the community in touch with the university, and so there's an opportunity for them to build those relationships and the expertise of seniors that is in this community would be a huge asset to MSJC. So yeah, that's a great idea. He said, "I know." Okay, so that's
Great.
it.
Well, great. A lot of good feedback. So we've gotten through all of our topics. Just in terms of next steps and where we're going with this, all of this feedback will inform this guy here, that poster, which is the process, and inclusive of working with the Blue Ribbon Committee, going out to the community. A lot of your brainstorming around who we go out to, how we go out to the community. We want to get to them where they are. We'll inform our outreach plan and how we engage with everyone. We'll make sure we come back and provide updates to you all as well. And then also just, the conversation around the different topics like the core values and the vision. Those are all things that we're going to go out to the community to check in with them as well. So, Andy, I'm going to turn it over to you if there's anything else with process or schedule, and then I'll turn it over to Luke, right?
Thank you. No, that was it. Unless there's any other questions, I know we're close on time, so we'll definitely want to hand it back.
Okay, well, this is very informative, and I love the discussions that we get to have, brainstorming this way, and I look forward to hearing what the community has to say, too, in all of those workshops. So, Aaron?
Thank you, team, and thank you to the council. Heard a lot of good things, and this was time well spent, and we took a lot of notes, and so we've kind of captured all this, and I know our consultants have too. I did want to share just a few observations, and then I know we have public comment as well. But one of the things, I heard, there's a lot to be proud of, right? And yet there's always room for improvement. I think it was Councilman Sam Pratt that used to use that phrase all the time. There's always room. How you doing? There's always room for improvement.
Yeah.
So having said that, just some things. The slide that sort of illustrated the demographic change, I think you guys honed in on, probably why you're seeing the exit of that demographic, which has to be related to real estate and probably employment. And so I just think it's important to acknowledge that cost of housing and so forth. The other thing is the citizen opinion survey. When you step back and you look at our report card and you look at all the marks and what people said, for me, from a city manager's perspective, I feel pretty darn good that we are, if you overlay that, what people are saying, with what is in the operating budget and what's in the capital budget and what's a priority, it overlays pretty darn well, which tells me that we are keeping our finger on the pulse, but we're investing in what is important to our community. So I just wanted to make that illustration, and I think a good example of that was, homeless rising to 12%, or it was the number 2 concern. You all know what we're doing on the homeless prevention front, on the education front, what we've invested in RSO, what we've invested in SWAG. So it's not going to be solved overnight. It requires diligence, but that's just an example. Old Town and Public Safety, the Metro team. I mean, these were sort of some really good business decisions that, hopefully we're going to see improvement, in that arena. You noticed in the original document, there was a phrase that was coined. It said, building greatness, maintaining excellence. And that was sort of an acknowledgement to, we're building, we're a brand new city, but let's not lose sight of maintaining what we build. And I think I heard all 5 of you sort of touch on that. It's like it's important to continue to invest in city assets. And this council deserves a ton of credit because over the last 4 to 5 years, there's been policy. You guys have adopted policies that have created asset management plans that we're paying ourselves into these accounts as priorities and stuff. So that long-term fiduciary fiscal responsibility, this council has set the stage for a lot of that, and I didn't want that to get lost. There was a lot of conversation about metrics and measurements. I think that's important. We weren't really doing that as a city until the Quality of Life Master Plan in 2010. So if you really want to dig into this, every year we evaluate over 150, right, performance measures, give or take a few, and that sort of goes into the operating budget, and they get changed, some stay the same. So I think that's still a good thing, and I'm hearing the council say loud and clear it's important to measure what it is that we're setting out doing. along those lines, data, focus, being inclusive of our community and trying to reach populations. I think we heard that sort of loud and clear. And then Mayor Pro Tem Ron, you had mentioned, possibly an 8th core value, with identity or arts and culture, and we heed that. And when I was going through the original document, I was struggling, and I knew arts and culture was buried in there, but I had to go and find it, and it's buried in healthy and livable. And so it's there, but it might be, maybe it's not as prominent of a core value. Maybe it does deserve to be its own. I don't know. Time will tell. But just wanted to put that out there. And then the small town definition, good point made. I mean, on a personal note, I have some 21-year-old and a 19-year-old that did leave Temecula, Stu, and my story is like yours. They went away to school, but when they come home, they want to be back here. And I don't know that that's the case for all young people in that category, but they do mature, and they have developed a perspective on maybe what we're trying to do here versus what happens in a big city like San Jose or somewhere else. So that is refreshing. And then Councilman Stewart, you had talked about education, and I take that community education, I take that very seriously, and that's a hard thing to get everybody to understand what's in the pipeline. And we are open to suggestions. I think the call went out at the last council meeting, like, hey, you got ideas, send them, email them in, because we're doing a lot of things, but we can't force people to read what it is that we're putting out there. But we do once a year. I think we do what you say, and once a year it comes in the form of the State of the City address, where it's everything. It's all the highlights. It's what has happened. It's what's coming, and maybe we can sort of consider how to do that piecemeal throughout the year, maybe better. So just some thoughts, but I just kind of wanted to put that out there to the community. So thank you for indulging me. Thanks for your time, and then I know we're wrapping up, and then we'll get to public comments. Luke, is there anything you want to add?
No, I think we're running up against the time, so I think it's closing thoughts at this point.
Do you have any closing remarks on what we discussed already? No? Okay, we're good. Then, Madam City Clerk, do we have public comments?
Yes, Madam Mayor, we do have some public comments. We have a couple in person,
Okay.
and then we have a couple that were emailed last night, and then I have some that came in this morning as well. So we'll go with in person first, and because it is a business item, folks will have up to 5 minutes. So the first speaker is Bob Cowell, to be followed by Mark Lane.
Okay. Mr. Cowell, you still with us?
In spirit, yeah. Hey, look at that. This thing's a piece of art here.
I know.
You should sign this thing, and we could sell it. Look at that. I was amazed when you put that together. Am I on a timer?
Yeah.
Yes, your time has started.
Okay. Hey, Zach mentioned something about humidity. Part of the reason we have humidity here is because of the water. So we're using a lot of water, a lot of grass. And I went down to Palm Springs 30 years ago, and I said, how come it's so humid here? And people said because of all the golf courses. I want to say also, I love your shirt, Matt. I want to get one like it. Looks really good. Another thing was teachers, why the teachers are coming back. Well, I can tell you they have high salaries here, so if you have high salaries for something, you come to where the money is. So I noticed the bar chart there, and I was at the top of the bar chart where the 65 and plus. So I fit in that category of people. However, I am the smallest minority on earth, and that is me, the individual. So who said that? It was Ayn Rand. So just to let you know. So I have some things to say about, government in itself. In California, we consider most of California just corrupt. The LA County, Los Angeles, San Francisco, all the major cities around the country are all corrupt. So what I have noticed about them is they grow to a point where it's like a flower growing up and then it dies and then but part of it is it's self-perpetuating. It happens for a reason. And part of the reason is the growth of it. And if you have I was looking at the video last night. I noticed that in the video, Chuck Washington, this is before, about the quality of life, 2021 or 2020 or whatever it was, Agenda 21. It was Agenda 21. That's Agenda 2030 also, Matt. Anyway, so he said, you need a strategic plan to direct the economic development. Okay. When you have a plan for directing economic development, what that does is something like it happens in Mexico and all over the United States in many cities, is that once you've created that bind to a private entity, you have now created a system where those entities can pay off the people in charge. So, for instance, city councilmen, congressmen, everybody become millionaires because they don't, not because of the salary and not because of the stipends, but because of all the what you might call just corruption. If it's not soft, sometimes it's hard. So I want to point that out that this very system that we're creating right here can cause corruption. The other thing is, the quality of life, sustainability, that's part of Agenda 30, Agenda 21. Sustainability actually is total control of your lives in the end. What happens is it's really a cradle to grave life. So you actually are giving up your freedoms. For me, I'm a freedom guy. I'm an individual, so I'm thinking of, my neighbor across the street said, "Hey, why are we still living here?" It's still Marietta and Temecula are still one. I came here when we were both Rancho California. We were thinking of creating Rancho California instead of Temecula and or Marietta. So I just well, anyway. It's just a lot of things that were brought up on sustainability that just have too much to do with me thinking maybe I should leave, maybe I should go somewhere else. And a lot of people have. A lot of people have left this area. Where are they going? Well, a lot cheaper area. This is too expensive. And why is it too expensive? Because government's too big. And why is government too big? Because of programs that make it too big. Quality of life program is something that makes it too big. I'm just
Madam
sorry.
Mayor, that's 5
Thank you.
minutes.
Thank you, Bob.
The next speaker is Mark Lane. And Mark is to be followed by Greg. I'm not really sure what the last name is, but starts with S.
Welcome, Mr. Lane.
Hello, how are you doing today?
Good.
This has been a pretty good session, and most of you have seen me at the last city council meeting. But there are a couple of things that I noticed here and wanted to bring up as well, and I think it's going to be fairly consistent with what I've brought up in the past. The first thing is the survey and the metrics, and the second thing is communication. My comment about survey and metrics is those surveys are only as good as the questions that are asked. Lots of times they're open-ended questions, so we have to be very, very careful when we bring these surveys up again, which is something I'm sure you're going to be doing, that you're asking those specific questions, and I know you talked about that during some of the comments, that the questions need to not be open-ended, they need to be specific so that you know what you're measuring. Because if you gear the questions to the answers that you want to hear, you're going to get that. So they have to be very unbiased, and they have to be very, very straightforward. You need to know what you're going to measure after that. I bring up the story of the guy in the security booth that was watching a fella wheel out a wheelbarrow of sand every day to his truck. And he watched him about 30 days, then he reported it to the authorities, and they didn't figure out that he was stealing wheelbarrows. They thought he was stealing sand. So you really need to know what you're looking at. So when you ask these questions and when you really do these surveys, they have to be very specific, and you're going to get that information through communications. We talked about that a little bit earlier, and you know, you have a lot of mechanisms out there within the city, emails, websites, what have you, but it's like, you know, I'm going to put on a show over here, but nobody knows about it. I got this great show, but nobody knows about it. Well, it was on the website, or you should have got the email. I'm telling you that if I want to get your opinion, I think the best way to do it is to ask you directly. I don't have all the answers to do that. It's very difficult for us to go out and ask 100,000 people exactly what they want. But I think that's got to be something we consider when we go forward, is that we really need to be a person that asks a person. We talked about a small-town community. That's what I remember when I was growing up. Everybody knew everybody. So if I was in so-and-so's backyard, my folks knew it before I did. That type of thing. So it's got to be a one-on-one situation. It's got to be a situation where you advertise and that you get the input from the people. Because if you're just doing things to do them, they may sound good to you, but for example, we talked about an equity value. How many people in the city know about that? Not if they've not been to the city councils very often. I think those are the things you got to get input on. That one, and how do you think we're going to stay here? Is it our politics here in Temecula, or is it the, you know, California politics? I know a lot of people have left my area because of the politics, and it's not necessarily Temecula. So those are the kind of things that we have to look at going forward. So make sure that when we're doing these surveys that we're getting the input from the people that really, really matter. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then Greg? Greg, are you here? Okay, I don't see Greg. So the last in-person speaker is Greta.
Good afternoon.
Moving forward, is it possible to put the public comments at the beginning? Because so many people want to share things about Temecula, things that they felt should be implemented, and they can't stay over 3 hours to leave a comment or to share a comment. So it's something you might think about.
Typically, public comments at council meetings are in the beginning for 30 minutes. But because this is a workshop, so we're not making any decisions, and we thought it would, if you were going to comment, we thought you'd want to see the presentation first, and that might assist with your comments.
That's fair. The first thing I want to say is, yes, we love Temecula the way it is. I don't think we should go high density. I'm from Duluth, and I remember years back we fought Walker Basin. They wanted to bring thousands of homes up there, and there were only 450 homes at the time. I'm so grateful we fought that. We united. Every time that I drive up that road by Walker Basin, I think, thank God, there's not high-density housing here. I think we need to attract high-end jobs. It's opportunity that will bring people here. Keeping the crime low, like Stu said. Keeping it a wonderful community with opportunity will draw those people. Low-income housing, or housing that is more affordable, without having the right jobs to support it, doesn't make sense. I think we need more technical jobs, things with higher-end skills, like they've done a great job of that in Orange County and in San Diego. So that's my first comment. The second one I wanted to talk about is, this has to do with ready. Sometimes they cloak an agenda in platitudes, and I think that's something we have to be very careful of. I don't see any systemic racism here. I've been here for 26 years. And I would like to share something to you that personifies exactly what I'm talking about. The equal right of all citizens to health, education, work, food, security, culture. These are the same rights we proclaimed when we began our struggle. These are in addition to our dreams of justice, equity, equality for all inhabitants of our world. Fidel Castro. Enough said. I left the meeting on Tuesday, which I spoke, so I won't be redundant and share my comments on that again. But they talked about park benches and then creating something in the community. And as I left, I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to have park benches that inspired things like Mahatma Gandhi, be the change you wish to be in the world, something that empowered people to not let any limitation keep them from going after their dreams. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Madam Mayor, I'll go ahead and read these into the record first, and then I have, like I said, a couple that came in this morning as well. The first one is from Rick Reese. In regards to the special meeting regarding the Temecula 2030 Quality of Life Master Plan, my comments and concerns are as follows. Number one, Temecula's Qlmp must jettison any implicit and/or explicit plans to introduce high-density housing into our community. This current COVID-19 pandemic has clearly demonstrated that high-density housing plays a strong role in accelerating pandemic contagions due to close living proximities. Simply put, germs spread faster when people are congregated tightly together. This is common sense. Number two, another reason why the Qlmp must jettison any plans for high-density housing is due to the increased carbon footprints created by people in close proximity to one another. As human beings engaged in human activity, we all leave carbon footprints. High-density housing results in high concentrations of people, which causes a larger carbon footprint, i.e. cause and effect. More people equal bigger footprint. This too is common sense. Number three, a third reason to abandon any plans for high-density housing are the societal dysfunctions which are typically manifested in high-density environments. Aberrant behaviors and social breakdowns are common in such urban environments. Prime examples of urban decay, squalor, and high crime rates include Portland, Seattle, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, New York, and Minneapolis, to name just a few. In no way should Temecula try to emulate these cities, which now only serve as cautionary warnings of what not to do. Number four, the city and its Qlmp must zealously guard its rights and prerogatives to maintain control over local zoning. Many of our neighborhoods are zoned for single-family housing. This is ideal and the reason why people have moved here seeking a haven away from urban dystopian centers like Los Angeles. As city leaders, you must resist the sirens called by the countless globalists and social engineers inhabiting bureaucracies throughout Sacramento and Washington, D.C. As civic leaders, you must protect and defend the lifestyle and property rights of the constituents whom you represent. Number five, lastly, you must avoid any plans for high-density housing and zoning changes, despite whatever pleas and nonsense will be thrown your way. Equity and diversity will be used as justifications to sell out our viable community, all in the name or goal of some social utopian vision. Out-of-touch bureaucrats in distant capitals like Sacramento and Washington, D.C. cannot possibly know what families and individuals living and working here in Temecula need and want on a daily basis. The government closest to the people serves the people the best, has frequently been attributed to Thomas Jefferson. Regardless, the simple truth remains that families and individuals, not government, make the best decisions regarding their and their children's health, safety, security, education, jobs, and welfare. As our elected city representatives, all five of you best reflect and act on behalf of Temecula's residents, all of whom are continually making these day-to-day living decisions as they best see fit. The next speaker is Bob Quaid. As you contemplate the Temecula Quality of Life Master Plan this morning, please consider that our fair city is experiencing every growing traffic issue brought on by new housing developments being approved by this council and other neighboring city councils. One of the elements of core value number 6, transportation, is to coordinate land use and transportation to create a balanced, modern, integrated transportation system. Reasonable traffic is a major quality of life issue for most of us here in Temecula and the Valley. So as you consider future residential developments in the city, please try to minimize high-density housing until a long-term plan can be developed to reduce the growing congestion in our city. The next speaker is Brian and Christine O'Neill. We have resided in Temecula since 1988. We love the open spaces and natural beauty. It seemed a healthier and happier lifestyle than living in a larger city in Los Angeles County. In fact, most of our neighbors and friends that choose to live here come for the same reasons. During the recent pandemic, we learned that those persons living in high-density housing suffered an increase in the rate of contagious disease spread. We also learned that the environment is negatively impacted by a heavier carbon footprint. Additionally, data suggests that when human beings are placed in a high-density housing configuration, persons may exhibit aberrant behaviors. High-density housing would create an unhealthy standard of living for human beings and for the environment in which we all live. The next speaker is Lori Hulsey. My family and I moved here in 1987 with the population only being 10,000. I refer to it as the good old days when Rancho California didn't have a stop sign or signal. When my family moved here from Fountain Valley, I was 19 and hated it for all the things it didn't have. Now with so many people living here and being a bit older, I wish it would go back to those days. The reason people moved out here was for the planned community where people were not living on top of each other. Many families made the transition to Temecula for the same reason. High-density housing would destroy the original dream of what Temecula is and what it continues to be. Temecula should not be a hometown that leaves a heavier carbon footprint. Our infrastructure cannot support high-density housing. Please do not change this lovely town to support high-density housing where it will become just another overgrown city and lose the meaning of what it means to live and be a part of Temecula. The next speaker is CB Holmes, and it's a little lengthy, so. Thank you for hearing my comments in relations to the Temecula Qlmp update. After hearing the presentation of the survey at the July 13th meeting, it appears obvious that our community is very unified across the board. So I am praying that you will honor those results and use the survey as a guideline as you consider anything regarding the Qlmp going forward. You know the specific results, so I won't take the time to list them. But it's clear that most everyone likes a safe, clean, small-town atmosphere with beautiful landscaping and open space. It's noteworthy that affordable housing is at the bottom. And when it comes to one change to improve the city, addressing racism issues is also at the bottom. So even though only 1.6%, again, that's 1.6% of Temecula residents would like you to address racism issues, you have created an entire commission for it. And as if that weren't enough, you appear to be going forward with adding an equity as a core value to our Qlmp. If you are truly listening to the wants and needs of your residents, you will absolutely not add equity as a core value. It's that simple and shouldn't need further explanation. Even Mr. Matt Ron gives examples of how well Temecula has helped the underserved in the past without an additional commission. The veterans and seniors and disabled he described assisting are of any and every race. That's equality. But equity would dictate that you break them down by race and assist the black and brown colored veterans before the white colored veterans, the black and brown colored seniors before the white colored seniors, and the black and brown colored disabled before the white colored disabled. With a straight face, please tell me, does that sound right to you? Because it should not. But since you have taken it this far in spite of what your community is clearly telling you through surveys and passionate pleas, I'll explain why you should not continue using the word equity. You must have noticed that our freedoms are slowly being eroded by people seeking equal outcomes, otherwise known as equity. This is an anti-American ideology. They are not concerned about equal opportunity. They want everyone, regardless of their efforts or lack thereof, to have the same outcomes. You can try to describe it in different terms, but that is how it's met now. That is the definition of socialism, and you know it. You must not be acknowledging that it is what you are indeed supporting. It's not getting through to you somehow. That's what is making everyone upset. How else do you expect freedom-loving Americans of all backgrounds to react? We are beside ourselves with justified worry over the direction you are taking things. The only thing that could make matters worse is that most residents are not aware of it. You can argue that you have been transparent, but you know that most people didn't get the memo, so to speak. You know it deep down, and you have the survey to back that up. We all have trusted you so much that we could never have imagined you taking this course. And what will you do with our trust? You could honor it by sticking to what is upheld by our Constitution. freedom and equality, which is already reflected in the Qlmp as is, or you could betray it by choosing equity and the socialist platform it stands on. Almost 115,000 people are at your mercy. Please choose wisely. And then I also have, as I mentioned, a few emails. So let me go ahead and bring those up really quickly. Okay, I think I can start reading them off the phone. Okay, the first one is from Julie Gary. Having an equity value in our city's quality of life plan underscores the commitment to making Temecula a city that is welcoming, safe, and prosperous to all. It is important that all members of the community are thought about regardless of color, age, ability, religion, gender, identity, or sexuality. Equity means having a means of support and resources so that everyone can access all that the community has to offer and that the offerings represent and reflect the diverse, beautiful community. Please add the equity value to the quality of life plan. The next speaker is Karen Brand. Equity value is not necessary, and that focusing on DEI is not aligned with the city's values. We do not make equality and equity synonyms here. We do not want any more steps towards socialism. The next speaker is Christine Massa. I understand City Council is workshopping on the city's quality of life plan, which should include efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion. As a 17-plus year resident, I can share these values have always been important to me for our city, and they are even more important to my children who have never known a city other than Temecula as home. I may not personally experience racism, but I see it from profiling to ignorant comments on Facebook to hearing about it from my neighbors and friends of color. Right here in Temecula, even in my own Harveston neighborhood, we can do better. Inclusion and equity are also important to me. I have one son and 2 daughters. It's important to me that my daughters have the same opportunities as my son and receive fair treatment. My daughter has played on flag football teams in town where she's been ridiculed for being the only girl on her team, despite being a talented athlete. Why should she have to experience that? I love the conversations my daughters and I used to have about the flawless eyebrows and makeup on the person behind the counter at Get Air. None of us cared what gender they were. They presented male, but those eyebrows were to die for, and we told them so. But I would be willing to bet they did not receive the same treatment from everyone they encountered, and that's not acceptable here. Please let City Council know on my behalf that diversity, equity, and inclusion values need to have a place of pride in our town for now and for future generations of respectable and inclusive Temeculans. The next speaker is Jeff Pack. After listening to the fringe, unhinged, and radicalized segments of the population waste our City Council's time with lies and baseless attacks on the Reddy Commission last week, I would like to suggest the Council make diversity, inclusion, and equity protocols into the quality of life master plan. It's clear to me the city and region need it more than ever. Moving forward, as most societies do, our community continues to evolve, and it is imperative that we continue to grow with it. We are only as strong as our weakest, so let's make sure Temecula is a leader in leading. The next speaker is Laurel Lamont. And this one's kind of lengthy. So, do you guys have that timer real quick? 5 minutes?
Go for it.
Okay, in full support of the equity, diversity, and inclusion, Matt, Ron, I heard you speak about the underrepresented at the previous council meeting, but I heard no mention of the local workforce. The San Diego mayor calls it the missing middle. Let's talk about so-called affordable housing. Simply put, the term is a misnomer. There's nothing affordable about it. Let's start with the perception of who this housing is for. Poor people who don't want to work, lazy people who are looking out for a handout, unethical people who take advantage of the system. To be sure, those people are out there, but they are not the majority by any measure. They are, however, political talking points. The lazy, entitled welfare mom or jobless dad who sits on their ass while the hardworking middle class foots the bill is the basis of every conservative voter, pundit, or politician's indignation when the issue of affordable housing comes up. In the interim, their liberal counterparts, who are almost always driven by unchecked emotion, focus their time and energy on the latest social injustice, and the local workforce remains invisible. Perceptions aside for a moment, what is affordable housing in actuality? Based on 10 years of personal research, not to mention firsthand experience, I can say with the utmost confidence, affordable housing is a marketing strategy used in tandem by politicians and the developers they serve. Are there a few well-intended elected officials and activists in the mix? Sure, but their intentions are drowned out by the persistent self-interest and greed that has caused California to be roughly 3 million homes short of what it needs to keep up with demand. This puts property owners in the privileged position to charge top dollar for the limited supply of available housing, hence California's housing shortage. For the record, this does not represent the laws of supply and demand that our pro-capitalism culture embraces. It is an artificially induced shortage for the benefit of a few. Regardless, in response to this growing crisis, the state, up until 2011, showered local government with hundreds of millions of dollars of free money with one stipulation: it must be spent on affordable housing. Translation: local elected officials had tons of grant money to spend on anything they labeled affordable housing. Enter local unimpeded power and the relationship it created between elected officials and private developers. To quote former Los Angeles County Supervisor Zev Yolozvsky, affordable housing has had nothing to do with reversing blight, but everything to do with subsidizing private real estate ventures that otherwise made no economic sense. The point is, affordable housing isn't really about providing housing to the working poor. That's just how it's sold. Now back to perceptions. The local workforce, made up of food servers, grocers, gas station attendants, janitors, hairstylists, and every other lower income worker that thriving local economies are dependent upon, is not politically represented by either side. Conservatives typically perceive lower income work as transitional jobs intended for high school and college students until they get real jobs. Conservatives justify their NIMBYism or anti-affordable housing position with indignation over the choice local workers make to stay in low-paying jobs or to not work hard enough to afford a home without government assistance. Conversely, liberals blame Republicans and the greedy corporations they are in bed with for the affordable housing shortage. Liberals fixate on Democratic talking points such as raising minimum wage as the solution to the housing crisis. Then they get caught up in every social justice outrage, be it kids in cages or white privilege, and shift their focus accordingly. In the interim, the local workforce is not advocated for by either side. And when an occasional affordable housing complex is constructed, which is often built as cheaply as possible and elitely segregated, liberals and conservatives alike view these for-profit developers as community heroes. It's a convoluted, if not utterly corrupt system that will never resolve California's housing crisis. Today's economic scales are incredibly misbalanced. A few generations ago, the local workforce had a fighting shot at buying a home and enjoying the so-called American dream. Because this is the thing, most low-income workers are not interested in a 4,000 square foot house. Attainable home ownership, despite the gross misconceptions, isn't about government giving everybody the same house. It's not a form of communism where everyone, whether doctor or fast food worker, gets to own the same house. Attainable home ownership, which actually existed once upon a time in this country, allows the guy who works 40 hours a week at the local Trader Joe's to buy a simple 1,000 square foot house to raise his family in. It allows him to enjoy the security of a fixed mortgage as opposed to being forever subjected to a predatory rental market, and allows them to accumulate a modest amount of wealth.
5 minutes.
Madam Mayor, that's 5 minutes. And the next speaker is Patricia Ramirez. Please continue to support DEI, and include it in your discussions on your quality of life plan. Remember that as long as citizens are asking for this, then it is needed. If you are thinking about the quality of life of all citizens of Temecula, please remember all its citizens, including what you can do to help those that continue to experience racism and other forms of hate in this city. I have lived here for 7+ years, and it continues to astound me the level of racism, homophobia, and general mistrust of neighbors. Removing this mistrust, fear, and hate has to be lead at all levels, and most visibly by the leaders of this city and all that they do. And the last speaker is Suzanne Lane. Just a quick comment. I realize that Riverside County is calling racism a health epidemic, but please think this through completely. The ideology of diversity, inclusion, and equity are in fact racist in nature. So in some aspect, I agree that we have a racial epidemic, but only in the institutions and businesses that are pushing critical race theory and diversity, inclusion, and equity. Please stop and take more time to hear the people and not rush into a politically motivated, toxic ideology. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights are our true roadmap. Madam Mayor, that includes all of the public comments that we had in person, that were received via email last night, and those that came in this morning.
Thank you, Randy. So I'm ready to ask for a motion and a second for adjournment if no one has any further comments or suggestions or questions. All right.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and we stand adjourned.